Welcome to my 100% free course on ISAC's Certified Information Security Manager, CISM certification. This is one of the hottest certifications in the industry and is excellent for people who want to move to a leadership position in IT security. CISM will give you authority and credibility as a cybersecurity leader or manager. It also shows your ability to become a strategic enterprise security leader. Please like and subscribe to my channel and grow the cybersecurity industry together. Click on the bell button to be alerted to new content in my channel. Do also share with your friends and comment for compliments or improvement. The CISM exam contains 150 multiple-choice questions to be completed in 4 hours. Candidates are tested on these 4 information security management areas. Domain 1, Information Security Governance, has over 17% exam weight, which was recently changed from 24% by ISAC as per the new outline. As per ISAC, the first domain tests candidates' ability to develop, maintain and manage information security governance frameworks. Candidates must identify the relevant, contractual, and regulatory requirements that impact the enterprise, and they have to describe the influence of enterprise structure, culture and leadership on the performance of an information security strategy. The domain also features a way of measuring the impact of information security strategy on enterprise risk management. Candidates must align the information security program with the operational objectives of other business functions. Among other concepts, they will be asked about security metrics, which describe how a periodic and quantitative security performance assessment can be effectively measured. Remember, this is a revision course in which I will cover all the main topics at a high level. Please practice the exam questions and read the book. If you rely only on this video and hope you will pass, the exam will be challenging. Unless you have vast experience in the industry and understand all the domains covered in the certification. CISM is a challenging exam and needs study and practice. Good luck, CISM. The first topic is Information Security Governance, which is the set of responsibilities and practices exercised by the board and executive management. Information security governance must be addressed at the highest organizational level. As part of enterprise governance, executive management and board of directors are accountable and must provide the necessary leadership. Organizational structures, processes. Information security must be top-down and seen as a business enabler, not bottom-up, where it is seen as a bottleneck. Usually, a senior member of the C-level is given the responsibility. Example, if a role exists, Chief Information Security Officer, CIO, CFO or even the CEO. Benefits of solid information security governance include improving trust and customer relationships, protecting the organization's reputation, providing accountability for safeguarding information during critical business activities. These are just a few of the benefits of information security governance. Effective information security can add significant value to organizations by reducing losses from security-related events, assuring that security incidents and breaches are not catastrophic. This is the key to CISM. Outcomes of information security governance. A properly implement information security governance will give out the following positive outcomes. Strategic alignment. Information security will be aligned with business strategy to support objectives. Risk management. Information security will mitigate risk and reduce impacts to acceptable levels. Value delivery. Optimizing security investments in support of objectives. You will see the return on the budget that is invested. Resource optimization. Security knowledge/infrastructure used efficiently/effectively. You have limited time and budget, so it will be used efficiently. Performance measurement. Monitoring and reporting to ensure objectives are achieved. Metrics are crucial to achieving success and finding out if goals are being met or not in security, integration or process assurance. Organizations typically operate one or more separate assurance processes in silos that are not integrated. An effective strategy would work to break down these silos and consolidate assurance processes. Reducing hidden risks. Corporate governance is the set of responsibilities and practices exercised by the board and executive management. Goals include providing strategic direction, ensuring that objectives are achieved, ascertaining that risk is managed appropriately, verifying that the enterprise's resources are used responsibly. What is information security governance? Is a subset of corporate governance, provides strategic direction for security activities and ensures that objectives are achieved, ensures that information security risk is appropriately managed. Also helps ensure that information resources are used responsibly. To achieve effective information security governance, management must establish and maintain a framework. Framework will guide the development and management of a comprehensive information security program that supports business objectives. The governance framework generally consists of a comprehensive security strategy linked with business objectives, security policies that address each aspect of strategy, controls and regulation, a complete set of standards for each policy, an organizational structure void of conflicts of interest with sufficient authority and resources, metrics and monitoring processes to ensure compliance and provide feedback. An ISM looks after the day-to-day operations of information security within an organization. Executive management looks to the information security manager to define and manage the information security program, provide education and guidance to the executive team. These are the responsibilities of the information security manager. Present options and information to enable decision-making, acts as an information security advisor, making them the trusted person for the company to reach out to for advice. Information security manager develops security strategy with input from critical business units and approval of strategy by senior leadership. Educates management. Now, we will look at the classification of security policies, similar to what we will learn from PMP, Project Management Professional, certification. Policies are the high-level statements of management intent, expectations and direction. Procedures are the step-by-step processes that implement policies. They break down policies into detailed instructions. Standards are usually technical in nature and are used as the baseline to be followed. Guidelines are high-level recommendations which provide guidance on various areas such as email and internet usage, security governance activities and results. Within an effective security governance program, an organization's senior management team will see to it that the information systems necessary to support business operations will be adequately protected. Risk management. Management will ensure that risk assessments will be performed to identify risks in information systems and supported processes. Follow-up actions will be carried out that will reduce the risk of system failure and compromise. The policies and guides. Risk appetite is the level of risk an organization is willing to accept while pursuing its mission, strategy, and objectives. Organizations rarely have a single risk tolerance level across the entire business. Instead, different business functions and other security aspects will have varying risk levels. For example, a mobile gaming software company may have a moderate tolerance for risk in introducing new products, a low patience for workplace safety risks, and no tolerance for risk for legal and compliance matters. As a result, mature organizations will develop and publish a statement of risk tolerance or appetite that expresses risk tolerance levels throughout the business. This is usually set by the board of directors or executive management and defines the level of risk that an organization is comfortable to accept. The level of risk acceptance cannot be greater than the risk appetite. Risk treatment and risk acceptance decisions should be assigned to and made by associated business owners and executives who are accountable for those decisions. Many organizations utilize responsible, accountable, consulted, informed (RACI) charts to denote key responsibilities in business processes, projects, tasks, and other activities. A RACI chart assigns levels of responsibility to individuals and groups. The development of a RACI chart helps personnel determine roles for various business activities. A typical RACI chart is shown. The meanings of the 4 roles in a RACI chart are as follows. Responsible, the person or group that performs the actual work or task. Accountable, the person who is answerable for the complete, accurate, and timely execution of the work. Often this is a person who manages those in the responsible role. Consulted, one or more people or groups who consulted for their opinions, experience, or insight. People in the consulted role may be subject matter experts for the work or task, or they may be owners, stewards, or custodians of an asset associated with the work or task. Communication with the consulted role is two-way. Informed, one or more people or groups who are informed by those in other roles. Depending on the process or task, informed may be told of an activity before, during, or after its completion. Communication with informed is one way. Metrics are the means through which management can measure key processes and know whether their strategies are working. Metrics are used in many operational processes, but in this section, metrics related to security governance are the emphasis. Security metrics are often used to observe technical IT security controls and processes and determine whether they are operating properly. This helps management better understand the impact of past decisions and can help drive future decisions. For metrics to be effective, they need to be measurable. A common way to ensure the quality and effectiveness of a metric is to use the SMART method. A SMART metric is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely. Lastly, the metrics should be able to provide information that is as accurate as possible, so cost-effective and repeatable decisions can be made. And these decisions must be predictive and effortless for us to act upon. An information security strategy should state objectives/purpose/goals, delineate principal policies and plans for achieving objectives/purpose, goals, define the range of business and desired state of the business, provide the basis for an action plan, based on available resources and constraints, must contain provisions for monitoring and metrics to determine the level of success, identify the critical assets to be protected and classify them based on your company's risk appetite. A practical roadmap is one in which resources, budgets and constraints are kept in mind. What is the long term you want to accomplish through the information security strategy? Security strategy should always align with the organization's IT and business objectives. Otherwise, both money and effort will be well spent. The company needs to be constantly measuring and reviewing these business plans. There are numerous frameworks present to help in this. Most organizations select an industry standard control framework such as COBIT, NIST 853, ISO/IEC 27001, HIPAA, or PCI-DSS. Then, as part of the organization's risk management processes, additional controls are added as identified risks warrant. COBIT is the acronym for Control Objectives for Information and Related Technologies. ISAC created the COBIT framework to bridge the crucial gaps between technical issues, business risks and control requirements. COBIT can be implemented in any organization from any industry to ensure the quality, control and reliability of information systems. COBIT defines 5 critical principles for the governance and management of enterprise information technology. Principle 1, meeting stakeholders' needs. Principle 2, covering the enterprise end-to-end. Principle 3, applying a single integrated framework. Principle 4, enable a holistic approach. Principle 5, separating governance from management. This is an important framework. COBIT PAM allows you to determine the level of process maturity for a given set of IT-related processes and allows organizations to determine which processes are essentially under control and represent potential pain points. Process maturity has been a core component of COBIT for over a decade. However, in COBIT 5, there was a change from the maturity. The model used in COBIT 4.1 to a process capability model. Read out the levels and memorizes them. Level 0, incomplete process. Level 1, performed process. Level 2, managed process. Level 3, established process. Level 4, predictable process. Level 5, Optimizing process. Capability improvement framework that guides organizations to elevate performance. Capability maturity models are valuable tools for understanding the maturity level of a process and developing desired future states. The maturity of processes in the organization will vary, as it is appropriate for some processes to have high maturity while it is acceptable for others to have lower maturity. The right question to ask about each process is, what is the appropriate level of maturity for this process? CMMI helps companies benchmark their performance and build maturity by comparing their operations to good practices. The Capability Maturity Model, CMM, provides a framework for organizing improvement steps into 5 maturity levels that lay successive foundations for continuous improvement. Read out the levels. Level 1, Initial. This represents a process that is ad hoc, inconsistent, unmeasured, and unrepeatable. Level 2, Repeatable. This represents a process performed consistently and with the same outcome. It may or may not be well documented. Level 3, Defined. This represents a well-defined and well-documented process. Level 4, Managed. This represents a quantitatively measured process with one or more metrics. Level 5, Optimizing. This represents a measured process under continuous improvement. To develop a strategy, the security strategist must first understand the organization's present state and then define one or more desired future conditions. A gap analysis helps the strategist understand missing capabilities. The development of a roadmap defines the steps to develop missing capabilities and augment existing capabilities so that the strategy will be realized. A security strategist must anticipate obstacles and constraints affecting the achievement of strategic objectives and consider refining them so they can be realized. Do we have enough resources? Are there legal, physical, or cultural constraints that will block the implementation of the roadmap? Culture includes how personnel work, think, and relate to each other. A roadmap is a list of steps to achieve a strategic objective. The term roadmap is an appropriate metaphor because it represents a journey that, in the details, may only sometimes appear to be contributing to the objective. But in a well-designed roadmap, each task and each project gets the organization closer to the objective. A roadmap is just a plan, but the term roadmap is often used to describe the steps an organization needs to take to undertake a long-term, complex, and strategic objective. Usually, a roadmap can be thought of as a series of projects, some running sequentially, others concurrently, that an organization uses to transform its processes and technology to achieve the objective. Easily the biggest challenge to overcome, people are the most significant challenge and the weakest link in cybersecurity. In addition to awareness, abuse of authorized access or insider threat is one of the biggest threats facing companies. Controls like segregation of duties, logging, monitoring, etc., need to be implemented. Insider threats are scary. Threats that the legitimate user causes are much less predictable, making them harder to fight than a malware-based intrusion. Background checks by HR of new staff to ensure they meet the ethical standards. The CISO is the highest-ranking security person in an organization. A CISO will develop business-aligned security strategies that support current and future business initiatives and be responsible for the development and operation of the organization's information risk program, the development and implementation of security policies, security incident response, and perhaps some operational security functions. In some organizations, the CISO reports to the Chief Operating Officer, COO, or the CEO. Still, in some organizations, the CISO may report to the CIO, Chief Legal Counsel, or another person. Other similar titles with similar responsibilities include the following: Chief Security Officer, CSO. This position generally has the responsibilities of a CISO plus responsibilities for non-information assets such as business equipment and work centers. A CSO often is responsible for workplace safety. Chief Information Risk Officer, CIRO, generally, this represents a change of approach to the CISO position, from protection-based to risk-based. Chief Risk Officer, CRO. This position is responsible for all aspects of risk, including information, business, compliance, and market risks. This role is separate from IT. Many organizations do not have a CISO but instead have a director or manager of information security who reports further down in the organization chart. There are several possible reasons for organizations not having a CISO, but generally, it can be said that the organization does not consider information security as a strategic function. This will hamper the visibility and importance of information security and often results in information security being a tactical function concerned with primary defenses such as firewalls, antivirus, and other tools. In such situations, responsibility for strategy-level information security implicitly lies with some other executive, such as the CIO. This type of situation often results in the absence of a security program and the organization's general lack of awareness of relevant risks, threats, and vulnerabilities. Skills. An inventory of skills gives the strategist an idea of what staff members can accomplish. This is useful on a couple of levels. Tenure. This includes how many years of experience a staff member may have. Behavioral. This includes leadership, management, coordination, and logistics. Disciplines include systems engineering, network engineering, controls development, audit, risk management, and risk analysis. Technologies. This includes skills with specific technologies such as Palo Alto Networks firewalls, CentOS operating systems, Logarithm, and AppScan. Understanding skills at all of those levels helps the strategist understand the types of work that the current staff can perform, where minor skills gaps are, and where the strategist may recommend adding additional staff through hiring, contracting, or professional services. Audits reports are independent observations of a company's control environment. An internal report is usually conducted by internal audit departments and can provide valuable input into where control gaps are present. Regulators usually carry out external audits to assess compliance against standards like PCI DSS, ISO 27001, HIPAA, etc., and can provide a completely independent overview of the control environment. Both reports should be reviewed. Internal and external audits can tell the strategist quite a bit about the state of the organization's security program. A careful examination of audit findings can provide significant details on control effectiveness, vulnerabilities, disaster preparedness, or other aspects of the program depending on the objectives of those audits. When examining audit results, a security strategist needs to understand several things. Objective. The objective or purpose of the audit tells the reader why the audit took place. This often provides additional insight into why certain people, processes, or technologies were examined while others were omitted. For example, was an audit performed because it is required by regulation or another requirement, or was it served voluntarily as another means of self-improvement? Scope. The scope of an audit tells the reader which technologies, business processes, business locations, or other aspects of the organization were examined. Qualifications of auditors. An audit will be only as effective if its auditors are skilled and experienced in performing audits and are familiar with the things being audited. An IT auditor with little operational IT experience will not be as practical and insightful as an IT auditor with a background in some aspect of IT engineering or operations. Audit methodologies. It is essential for the reader to understand the methodologies used in any particular audit. For instance, did the auditor interview personnel, examine systems and records, observe personnel performing their tasks, or complete their functions? Equally important are sampling methodologies, including how samples are selected and who serves the selection. The security strategist needs to consider the bigger picture. Mainly, is the organization taking audit results and driving improvements into the organization, or are audit reports merely shelfware to show to regulators on their annual visit? Most organizations outsource a good portion of their IT systems and services. Unlike earlier years when organizations had their own data centers and when most or all applications were running in-house, usually called on-premise, today the model has almost wholly flipped. Organizations are moving the bulk of their business applications to cloud-based infrastructure as a service, IaaS, platform as a service, PaaS, and software as a service, SaaS, environments. The degree to which any particular organization has outsourced its business applications to the cloud is not concerning. Instead, what's important is the amount of due care exercised in outsourcing. The practice of determining and managing risks associated with outsourcing is called third-party risk. In lawyer speak, these external organizations are called third parties, and the organizations they outsource to are called fourth parties. The third-party risk practices that the strategists are looking for include the following: upfront due diligence. This is an assessment of risk performed on a service provider before the organization elects to use the service. This initial risk assessment allows the organization to enforce security-related terms and conditions on the service provider in the legal agreement. An upfront risk assessment may include one or more of the following: relationship risk assessment. Here, the organization analyzes the strategic importance of the service provider in terms of contract value and service criticality. Inherent risk assessment. This analyzes the service provider's financial health and geopolitical risk. Control risk assessment. This is an analysis of the controls that the organization would like the service provider to use to protect the organization's data. Site visit. The organization may elect to visit one or more of the service provider's processing sites and perhaps corporate offices. Risk tiering. This is establishing tiers of service provider risk. Based on the nature of services provided to the organization, each service provider is assigned a risk level or tier. The due diligence activities performed for each tier are commensurate with the risk level. For example, service providers at the highest risk tier may be issued a lengthy questionnaire annually and required to undergo annual penetration tests, and an on-site visit to confirm the presence of key controls. Service providers at a middle tier of risk may be issued a shorter questionnaire annually, and service providers at the lowest tier may be issued a brief questionnaire annually. Response to questions in questionnaires answered negatively will also vary according to risk tier. For top-tier service providers, this may involve a detailed mitigation plan. At lower tiers, there is a lower concern. Ongoing due diligence. Throughout a service provider relationship, the organization will periodically assess each service provider to ensure that risks discovered at the start of the association have not significantly changed. An organization will carry out several activities for upfront due diligence. Metrics are the means through which management can measure key processes and know whether their strategies are working. An information security plan needs to be monitored to ensure it is working and to give management assurance they see a return in security investment. Is the budget on track? Are the timelines being met? Has the risk environment changed? Have appropriate risks been identified? Is the company in compliance with the appropriate regulations now? Or are there still significant gaps? It should be regularly reported to management. Remember, it is a top-down approach. I hope that was useful. This is the most foundational of all the domains. Keep in mind how an information security organization is structured. What are the key things to keep in mind when developing a strategy? The benefits of governance. Make sure to practice the test questions also, and you will be ready for Domain 1. Domain 2 comprises 20% of the overall CISM information security management areas. It comprises of two topics mainly, which are information security risk assessment, information security risk response. The key thing to know inside out for this domain is risk management. How it works, why it's important, and how to do it. Let's start. Before we start, let us take a step back and talk about risk management. We practice risk management literally every day of our lives. Every time you put on a seatbelt, you are practicing risk management. Every time you lock your doors at night, you are doing risk management. We are going to see how risk management functions within the context of risk management. Cybersecurity is a massive subject, and risk management is a skill which is impossible to ignore as you move up the ladder. Remember that top management's key objective is to balance company risk and company finance. Risk management is the cornerstone of any good information security program. Risk management represents time-proven methods and techniques used to identify risks, understand their probability of occurrence and potential on the organization, make decisions about those risks based on established decision criteria, and measure key attributes of security and risk for long-term trending and reporting to executive management. In an ideal world, cybersecurity teams would have unlimited budgets and time. Unfortunately, that is not true. We have limited time, budget and resources. We want to make sure we spend that time and money on the stuff that matters. Understanding risk management will allow us to justify where the time and money will be spent and allocated. Risk management tells you where to spend your time and effort so that it is not wasted, maximizing opportunity cost for the company. Therefore, risk management is the answer. You really cannot reach a senior position without learning it. The board is not going to give you millions of dollars to spend if you cannot justify the spend. Learning risk management will be the most fundamental skill in cybersecurity. Similarly, audits might ask why you decided to focus on a particular area to fix and not some other. This is where risk management helps you in cybersecurity, so understanding the language of the business is important. An organization that implements an effective risk management program will have heightened awareness about the business use of technology and how that technology can impact the business. The greatest benefit that an organization will derive is a lower probability of security incidents. For incidents that do occur, the organization will be better prepared, and the impact of the incident will be reduced. This is not a choice in a regulated environment. No two risk management programs are alike. Instead, each is uniquely different based on several factors: culture, mission, objectives, and goals, management structure, management support, industry sector, market conditions, applicable laws, regulations, and other legal obligations, stated or unstated risk tolerance, financial health, operating locations. As a cybersecurity professional, you will need to justify the cost and effort of cybersecurity investments. Simply put, there is too much happening in an IT environment. Do you patch those internet-facing servers first? Or review the firewall? Or implement a new cloud security solution? Maybe a new anti-malware solution? Risk management is how you decide on a roadmap for the next 12 months. An organization that implements an effective risk management program will have heightened awareness about the business use of technology and how that technology can impact the business. The greatest benefit that an organization will derive is a lower probability of security incidents. For incidents that do occur, the organization will be better prepared, and the impact of the incident will be reduced. So, what is risk management? In a nutshell, this is the industry definition. Cybersecurity risk management is the process of identifying, assessing and controlling threats to an organization's technology environment. In simpler terms, it is a structured way to determine the critical risks to your environment and what needs to be done to fix them. Not really a choice in today's highly regulated environments. Standards like PCI, DSS, ISO and literally every other standard mandate it. It is also simply good practice to do it, so do remember to understand more about these standards. The acceptable level of risk is generally related to those factors: executive management's risk appetite, so management's risk appetite is important. The organization's ability to absorb losses, as well as its ability to build defenses. Regulatory and legal requirements. As the organization establishes its acceptable level of risk, also known as risk tolerance, this will drive the implementation and refinement of controls. Then, over time, risk assessments and risk treatment will cause adjustments to its controls. This is because controls are the primary means for mitigating risks by ensuring desired outcomes, whatever they may be. Several internal and external factors will govern the implementation of risk management objectives, including the following: culture, Organizational maturity, management structure, management support, market conditions, regulatory and legal requirements. No need to reinvent the wheel. Adopt any best practice standard and use that to build a risk management framework. Choosing the best practice framework will set the basic for anyone. And therefore, we do not need to start from scratch, and this is key as cybersecurity can be required on an immediate basis. This will ensure results of risk assessments are consistent and do not change from department to department. ISO, IEC 27001, Information Technology, Security Techniques, Information Security Management Systems, Requirements, especially Requirements 4 through 10, which describe the structure of an entire information security management system, ISMS, including risk management. ISO, IEC 27005, Information Technology, Security Techniques, Information Security Risk Management. ISO, IEC 31010, Risk Management, Risk Assessment Techniques. NIST Special Publication 837, Guide for Applying the Risk Management Framework to Federal Information Systems, a Security Lifecycle Approach. NIST SP 839, Managing Information Security Risk. COBIT 2019, Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology Framework. Framework components. Risk management frameworks have a common core of components, including the following: program scope, information risk objectives, information risk policy, risk appetite, tolerance, roles and responsibilities, risk management lifecycle process, risk management documentation, management review. The three levels of risk management. Modern risk management encounters a broad assortment of issues, ranging from corporate culture to the misconfiguration of individual servers. Conceptually, these issues are handled in the same way, with risk identification, analysis, treatment, and closure, but the personnel involved will often vary, and the deliberations will sound quite different. Risk management is best divided into three tiers. Enterprise level risks at this level are generally associated with organization culture and management's adequate support of cybersecurity capabilities. Risks at this level are conceptual and often reported to a board of directors. The practice of risk management at this level is known as Enterprise Risk Management, or ERM. An organization's ERM will often include cybersecurity risks and risks related to competition, market share, economics, workforce matters, and more. Process-level risks. Risks at this level are usually associated with the effectiveness of business processes, which affect cybersecurity posture. Issues at this level typically involve security policies, standards, process design, workflow, and workload. Asset-level risks. Risks at this level are associated with individual systems or small groups of systems. Generally, asset-level risks involve configuration and small-scale architecture. The analysis is focused on technical vulnerabilities and threats, and remediation is usually tactical. Risks at one tier sometimes inform adjacent tiers. For instance, a surge in asset-level threats may indicate defects in process-level risks or even a shift in workforce priorities. Similarly, the presence of multiple process-level risks may be an indication of macro issues that should be addressed at the enterprise level. Like other life cycle processes, risk management is a cyclical, iterative activity used to acquire, analyze, and treat risks. The risk management process consists of a set of structured activities that enable an organization to manage risks systematically. Like other business processes, risk management processes vary somewhat from one organization to the next, but generally, they consist of the following activities. Scope definition. The organization defines the scope of the risk management process itself. Typically, scope definitions include geographical or business unit parameters. Scope definition is not part of the iterative portion of the risk management process, although scope may be redefined from time to time. Asset identification and valuation. The organization uses various means to discover and track its information and information system assets. A classification scheme may be used to identify risk and criticality levels. Asset valuation is a key part of asset management processes, and the value of assets is appropriated for use in the risk management processes. Asset valuation is described in detail in Chapter 5. Risk appetite. Developed outside of the risk management lifecycle process, risk appetite is an expression of the level of risk that an organization is willing to accept. A risk appetite that is related to information risk is typically expressed in qualitative means. However, organizations in financial services industries often express risk in quantitative terms. Risk identification. In this first step in the iterative risk management process, the organization identifies a risk that comes from one of several sources, including the following. Risk assessment. This includes an overall risk assessment or a focused risk assessment. Vulnerability assessment. This may be one of several activities, including a security scan, a penetration test, or a source code scan. Threat advisory. This is an advisory from a product vendor, threat intelligence feed, or news story. Risk analysis. This is an analysis of risk that is focused on some other matter that may uncover additional risks requiring attention. Risk analysis. In the second step in a typical risk management process, the risk is analyzed to determine several characteristics, including the following. Probability of event occurrence. The risk analyst studies event scenarios and calculates the likelihood that an event associated with the risk will occur. This is typically expressed in the number of likely events per year. Impact of event occurrence. The risk analyst studies different event scenarios and determines the impact of each. This may be expressed in quantitative terms, dollars or other currency, or qualitative terms, high/medium/low, or a numeric scale of 1 to 5 or of 1 to 10. Mitigation. The risk analyst studies different available methods for mitigating the risk. Depending upon the type of risk, there are many techniques, including changing a process or procedure, training staff, changing architecture or configuration, or applying a security patch. Recommendation. After studying a risk, the risk analyst may develop a recommended course of action to address the risk. This reflects the fact that the individual performing risk analysis is often not the risk decision maker. Risk treatment. In the last step in a typical risk management process, an individual decision maker or committee makes a decision about a specific risk. The basic options for risk treatment are as follows. Accept. The organization elects to take no action related to the risk. Mitigate. The organization chooses to mitigate the risk, which can take the form of some action that serves to reduce the probability of a risk event or reduce the impact of a risk event. The actual steps taken may include business process changes, configuration changes, the enactment of a new control, or staff training. Transfer. The practice of transferring risk is typically achieved through an insurance policy, although other forms are available, including contract assignment. Avoid. The organization chooses to discontinue the activity associated with the risk. This choice is typically selected for an outdated business activity that is no longer profitable or for a business activity that was not formally approved in the first place. Risk communication. This takes many forms, including formal communications within risk management processes and procedures, as well as information communications among risk managers and decision makers. In addition to business processes, a risk management process has business records associated with it. The risk register, sometimes known as a risk ledger, is the primary business record in most risk management programs that list risks that have been identified. Typically, a risk register contains many items, including a description of the risk, the level and type of risk, and information about risk treatment decisions. What are the things that could happen to the asset? A. DDoS attack, malware, or even someone accidentally deleting a file is a threat. All realistic threat scenarios are examined for each asset to determine which are most likely to occur. Sometimes, A threat can be wrongly identified by the cybersecurity analyst. This can be considered a false positive and result in a waste of resources to identify and rectify the issue. Threat actors. The risk manager must understand the variety of threat actors and know which ones are more motivated to target the organization and for what reasons. This further illuminates the likelihood that a given threat scenario will occur. How does an attacker come into your environment? A server is your asset. Attacker is the threat. A missing patch then would be your vulnerability. Vulnerabilities usually take one of those forms. Configuration fault. A system, program, or component may have one or more incorrectly set configuration settings that could provide an attacker with opportunities to compromise a system. For example, the authentication settings on a system may enable an attacker to employ a brute force password guessing attack that will not be stopped by target user accounts being automatically locked out after a small number of unsuccessful login attempts. Design fault. The relationships between components of a system may be arranged in such a way that makes it easier for an attacker to compromise a target system. For instance, an organization may have placed a database server in its DMZ network instead of in its internal network, making it easier for an attacker to identify and attack. Known unpatched weakness. A system may have one or more vulnerabilities for which security patches are available but not yet installed. For example, a secure communications protocol may have a flaw in the way that an encrypted session is established, which could permit an attacker to easily take over an established communications session. There may be a security patch available for the security flaw, but until the security patch is installed, the flaw exists and may be exploited by any individual who understands the vulnerability and available techniques to exploit it. Sometimes, known weaknesses are made public through disclosure by the system's manufacturer or a responsible third party. Even if a patch is unavailable, other avenues may be available to mitigate the vulnerability, such as a configuration change in the target system. Undisclosed unpatched weakness. A system may have unpublicized vulnerabilities that are known only to the system's manufacturer. Until an organization using one of these systems learns of the vulnerability via a security bulletin or a news article, the organization can do little to defend itself short of employing essential security techniques such as system hardening, network hardening, and secure coding. Undiscovered weakness. Security managers have long accepted that all kinds of information systems have security vulnerabilities yet to be discovered, disclosed, and mitigated. New techniques for attacking systems are constantly being developed, and some of these techniques can exploit weaknesses no one knew to look for. As new techniques have been discovered that involve examining active memory for snippets of sensitive information, system and tool designers can design defense techniques for detecting and even blocking attacks. For example, techniques were developed that would permit an attacker to harvest credit card numbers from PCI-compliant point-of-sale software programs. Soon, effective attacks were developed that enabled cybercriminal organizations to steal tens of millions of credit card numbers from global retail companies. Vulnerabilities exist everywhere. In software programs, database management systems, operating systems, virtualization platforms, business processes, encryption algorithms, and personnel. As a rule, security managers should consider that every component of every type in every system has both known and unknown vulnerabilities, some of which, if exploited, could result in painful and expensive consequences for the organization. Asset value. The value of each asset is an important factor to include in risk analysis. As described earlier, assets may be valued in several ways. For instance, a customer database may have a modest recovery cost if it is damaged or destroyed. However, if that same customer database is stolen and sold on the black market, the value of the data may be much higher for cybercriminals, and the resulting costs to the organization to mitigate the harm done to customers may be higher still. Other ways to examine asset value is through the revenue derived from the asset's existence or use. What happens if your business is down for a day? If your email system stops working? If your credit card database is breached? Think of the financial and non-financial impact. This can be fines, reputation, media coverage, the cost to build back a system, etc. How would you arrive at a likely or not likely probability of a threat happening? First, we need to know the chances of threats happening. Do remember that it does not have to be guessing work. Lots of stuff you can use. Incident reports, audit reports, industry reports, threat intel, previous security alerts. This is the critical definition we need to remember. Risk is the probability of a threat exploiting a vulnerability and causing an impact. Two types: qualitative and quantitative. In qualitative risk analysis, where probability and impact are rated on simple numeric scales, a risk matrix is sometimes used to portray levels of risk based on probability and impact. The risk matrix shown here is an example. Most risk analysis begins with qualitative risk analysis, a rating technique that does not seek to identify exact, or even approximate, asset value or impact or the exact probability of occurrence. Risk items are expressed in levels such as high, medium, and low. The purpose of qualitative risk analysis is to understand each risk relative to other risks, so that higher risks can be distinguished from lower risks. This system enables the organization to focus on risks that are more critical, based on impact in qualitative terms. Semi-quantitative risk analysis. In semi-quantitative risk analysis, the probability of occurrence and impact can be expressed as a numeric value in the range 1 to 5, where 5 is the highest probability, for example. Then, for each asset and for each threat, risk can be calculated as probability times impact. For example, suppose an organization has identified two risk scenarios. The first is a risk of data theft from a customer database. The impact is scored as a 5, highest, and probability is scored as a 4, highly likely. The risk is scored as 5 times 4 equals 20. The second is a risk of theft of application source code. The impact is scored as a 2, low, and probability is scored as a 2, less likely. This risk is scored as 2 times 2 equals 4. This system helps the security manager understand that the data theft risk is a larger risk, scored as 20, compared to the source code theft risk, scored as 4. These risk scores do not imply that the larger risk is 5 times as likely to occur, nor do they imply that protecting against the larger risk is 5 times as expensive. The scores are used to determine only that one risk is larger than another. In quantitative risk analysis, risk managers attempt to determine the actual costs and probabilities of events. This technique provides more specific information to executives about the actual costs that they can expect to incur in various security event scenarios. There are two aspects of quantitative risk analysis that prove to be a continuing challenge. Event probability. It is difficult to come up with even an order of magnitude estimate on the probability of nearly every event scenario. Even with better information coming from industry sources, the probability of high-impact incidents is dependent upon many factors, some of which are difficult to quantify. Event cost. It is difficult to put an exact cost on any given security incident scenario. Security incidents are complex events that involve many parties and have unpredictable short and long-term outcomes. Despite improving information from research organizations on the cost of breaches, these are still rough estimates and may not take into account all aspects of cost. Because of these challenges, quantitative risk analysis should be regarded as an effort to develop estimates, not exact figures. In part, this is because risk analysis is a measure of events that may occur, not a measure of events that do occur. Standard quantitative risk analysis involves the development of several figures. Asset value, AV. The value of the asset is usually, but not necessarily, the asset's replacement value. Depending on the type of asset, different values may need to be considered. Exposure factor, EF. The financial loss that results from the realization of a threat is expressed as a percentage of the asset's total value. Most threats do not completely eliminate the asset's value. Instead, they reduce its value. For example, if an organization's $120,000 server is rendered unbootable because of malware, the server will still have salvage value, even if that is only 10% of the asset's actual value. In this case, the EF would be 90%. Note that different threats have different impacts on EF, because the realization of various threats will cause varying amounts of damage to assets. Single loss expectancy, SLE. This value represents the financial loss when a threat scenario occurs one time. SLE is defined as AV times EF. Note that different threats have a varied impact on EF, so those threats will also have the same multiplicative effect on SLE. Annualized rate of occurrence, ARO. This is an estimate of the number of times that a threat will occur per year. If the probability of the threat is 1 in 50, one occurrence every 50 years, ARO is expressed as 0.02. However, if the threat is estimated to occur 4 times per year, then ARO is 4.0. Like EF and SLE, ARO will vary by threat. Annualized loss expectancy, LE. This is the expected annualized loss of asset value due to threat realization. ALE is defined as SLE times ARO. ALE is based upon the verifiable values AV, EF, and SLE, but because ARO is only an estimate, ALE is only as good as ARO. Depending upon the value of the asset, the risk manager may need to take extra care to develop the best possible estimate for ARO, based on whatever data is available. Sources for estimates include the following. Now that you know the risk, what are you going to do about it? Do you reduce the risk? Implement DDoS controls, anti-malware solution. Accept the risk? Cost is too much. Management signs off on it and accept that this might happen. Transfer. Cyber insurance is a major thing now. You can insure against this risk happening. Avoid the risk altogether. Maybe your business decides that a particular application is not worth and simply scrap it altogether. Rare, but it happens. The aspect of risk treatment of utmost importance to the ongoing success of an organization's security management program is who makes the risk treatment decisions. Security manager. This person may be the most knowledgeable about risk, but this is not the best choice. A security manager who makes risk treatment decisions runs the risk of others in the organization not supporting those decisions. Security steering committee. A consensus decision is often the best choice, because stakeholders and others provide input and contribute to a decision. When stakeholders have a say in risk matters, they're more likely to support decisions affecting them. Owner. This may be a business process owner, business unit leader, or other senior executive whose process or system is the nexus of any particular risk. Undefined. An organization that does not define who makes risk treatment decisions is, by definition, not running an effective security management program. In many organizations, consensus decisions are made by a combination of these parties. Residual risk. Risk treatment rarely eliminates all risk. Instead, risk treatment will reduce the probability and/or the impact of a specific threat. The leftover, or residual, risk should be entered into the risk register for its own round of risk treatment. Depending upon the nature of the original risk, an individual risk may undergo 2 or more cycles of risk treatment, until finally, the residual risk is accepted and the risk matter closed. A risk register is a business record that contains information about business risks and information about their origin, potential impact, affected assets, probability of occurrence, and treatment. A risk register is the central business record in an organization's risk management program. Together with other records, the risk register serves as the focal point of evidence that an organization is at least attempting to manage risk. Other records include evidence of risk treatment decisions and approvals, tracking of projects linked to risks, and risk assessments and other activities that contribute content to the risk register. A risk register can be stored in a spreadsheet, database, or within a governance, risk, and compliance tool used to manage risk and other activities in the security program. Typical elements in a risk register include these groupings and details. Risk identification. Information about the introduction of the risk into the risk register, including a unique ID designation, the date of discovery, how it was discovered, and by whom. Risk description. Information about the risk itself, including relevant threats, vulnerabilities, and consequences. Affected assets. Information about assets or asset groups and the organization that are affected by the risk, as well as the business owners of those assets. Risk score. Information about the probability and impact of threat occurrence expressed in qualitative terms and possibly quantitative terms. Risk treatment analysis. Information about the potential impact of the various risk treatment options. Risk treatment. Information about risk treatment approved by the organization, including the person, group, or asset owner that made the risk treatment decision, the date that the decision was made, and a person or group responsible for carrying out the risk treatment. Risk management does not operate in a vacuum. Usually it is part of a complete cybersecurity program. Let us look at the steps and how it works. This is a key part that gets missed out a lot. First and most crucial step, make sure you have an executive sponsor like the CISO or the CEO or the CRO who is driving and taking ownership of cybersecurity risk management. Otherwise, teams will perceive this as an audit or a nuisance and you will not get the support. Only with management support then you will be able to get the info you need. Make sure it comes from the top. This should be easy for you by now. Follow the steps we discussed in the earlier phase and identify the key risks. Then use all the concepts we have learned earlier on. One of the easiest ways to find risks is to ask the asset's owner. If they realize you are there to help them secure their systems, they will happily give you lots of useful information. Now that you have a list of risks, this is where we think about fixing them. Knowing how to fix these issues. Cybersecurity risks that are of a medium to high rating usually do require fixing. Remember, we need to mitigate any issue if possible. What types of controls will you implement? Technical like MFA, logging, anti-malware, or maybe policy controls like awareness, usage policies, etc. As a professional, you will need to come into work on this. The output of the entire exercise will be a cybersecurity roadmap with goals and timelines. Because you will not be able to fix everything without any planning. Break the roadmap into tactical and long-term goals. This is any project manager will do it. The fix must be planned into immediate, within a month, or we need 6 months to fix it. The solutions and costs that are in this roadmap are all justified thanks to the risk exercise you did and can easily be shown to management or audits if they ask. Creating a roadmap is important. CISOs use this to show that every cost and effort has a thought process behind it. Management sponsors want to know their money is not being wasted, so be ready to know that which risk is being mitigated. Give regular feedbacks to your management team, CEO, on what the status of the risks are. This will give them the overview, understanding, and benefits. You can use KPIs, metrics like number of risks closed, risk aging, how much budget has been used, etc. Report it monthly or quarterly. If you are working in a tech company with many applications, then you will come across a type of cybersecurity risk assessment / referred to as a threat model. Threat modeling is used in technology companies to identify risks in modern applications. It basically breaks down an app into multiple components and uses diagrams to find out the possible threats that can happen. Modern applications are quite complex, consisting of multiple moving parts, and threat modeling helps to simplify risk assessment for applications. Threat modeling is the process of using hypothetical scenarios, system diagrams, and testing to help secure systems and data. By identifying vulnerabilities, helping with risk assessment, and suggesting corrective action, threat modeling helps improve cybersecurity and trust in key business systems. Tailor them towards your company's technology and applications. As organizations become more digital and cloud-based, IT systems face increased risk and vulnerability. Growing use of mobile and Internet of Things (IoT) devices also expand the threat landscape. This allows us to create diagrams to visualize how the application works and the threats within it. The process of threat modeling can provide an enhanced view of systems. The steps involved in threat modeling: creating data flow diagrams, DFDs, and graphical representations of attack paths, as well as prioritizing assets and risks, help IT teams gain a deeper understanding of network security and architecture. Help enable better collaboration on security. Proper threat modeling requires input from many stakeholders. Participating in the process can help instill cybersecurity consciousness as a core competency for all participants. Basic threat modeling can be performed in a brainstorming session and no special software is needed. STRIDE STRIDE stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service and elevation of privilege. This is the oldest threat modeling methodology and helps identify mitigating techniques. It is relatively easy to use but can be time-consuming. It focuses on the key threats in the table, read them out, and categories all the risks within them only. Another methodology is PAST or PASTA. It is an acronym that stands for Process for Attack Simulation and Threat Analysis. It is a 7-step risk-based threat modeling framework. It can cover more scenarios than STRIDE and even non-technical threats like bad PR. There are 7 stages to PAST, which are, read them out. I hope this was a good overview for you for the key concepts of Domain 2. It is essential to know risk management inside out for this domain and understand how risk management works. Risk management is an art which is essential for the success of any cybersecurity risk management program and comprises 20%, which is quite a large part. I suggest going over this domain multiple times to make the concepts clear in your mind. Domain 3 comprises 33% of the overall CISM information security management areas. It is called an information security program and comprises 2 topics, mainly, information security program development and information security program management. These will be the fundamental concepts that CISM will need to know. Information security does not exist in a vacuum and needs to be run as a program, which we will discuss in this domain. Let's buckle up and let us all sail through the CISM domain towards our professional careers. We will think about running a proper information security program in this domain. Put yourself as the project manager managing the whole cybersecurity program in your organization. You will need to think long-term and develop the best for your company to balance business risk and finances. Establishing and modernizing an organization's cybersecurity program is one of the most impactful activities with long-term benefits and consequences a security leader will undertake. Cybersecurity program improvements are implemented as a result of a strategic plan that we discussed earlier. This is a critical process to ensure your company's cybersecurity posture is in the best position. Cybersecurity program development includes creating policies, controls, standards, requirements, guidelines, and a formal structure for security functions described in separate charters. Information security programs comprise a collection of activities to identify, communicate, and address risks. The security program consists of controls, processes, and practices intended to increase the resilience of the computing environment and ensure that risks are known and handled effectively. The starting point of an information security program. A single individual may hold these activities in a smaller organization. In contrast, organizations will have a security leader who leads an internal team. Organizations of all sizes may need additional support from external partners. And what is the key we need to know? Such a program needs a top-down approach with C-level or top management support. With all the planning done, we need to understand that this will be the doing part after planning the strategy. Security program models have been developed that include the primary activities needed in any organization's security program. However, because every organization is different, Each security manager needs to understand their organization's internal workings so that their security programs can effectively align with the organization's operations, practices, and culture. A charter is a formal, written definition of the objectives of a program, its primary timelines, the sources of funding, the names of its principal leaders and managers, and the business executives sponsoring the program. In many organizations, a program charter document is approved by the CEO or executive leader, giving authority to the person or group that runs the program. The charter also demonstrates the support from the executive leadership team. An information security program charter gives authority to the security leader to develop and perform several functions, including the following. 1. Develop and enforce the security policy. 2. Develop and implement the risk management process. 3. Develop and manage security governance. 4. Develop and direct the implementation and operation of controls across department or business unit boundaries. 5. Develop and direct the implementation of key security processes, including vulnerability management, incident management, third-party risk, security architecture, business continuity planning, and security awareness training. With all the functions defined, we can now define the program's objectives. This includes timelines, funding and staff behaviors. Understanding all the factors affecting your company will help to work out a better schedule. Information security in an organization of any size is a team sport. And we will need a leader like senior management to authorize and support the program. The security manager, with or without staff, does not perform security functions alone. Rather, these activities involve nearly every other department, business unit, and affiliate in the organization. For this reason, the security charter must be ratified by executive management. A security charter that designates the security manager as the person responsible for implementing the program does not give the security manager the right to dictate the program to others. So what consists part of the information security program? First, we will have the scope. An early step in the creation of an information security program is the definition of its scope. Management needs to define the departments, business units, affiliates, and locations to be included in the organization's information security program. The scope of a program is essential, because it defines the boundaries and what parts of the organization are to be included and subject to information security governance and policy. The main objective is for us to know what we need to cover. Second will be information security processes. Information security programs include numerous business processes that fulfill the overall mission of information and information systems protection. These processes fall into three major categories: risk and compliance, architecture, and operations. Processes are for us to understand how we will do it. Finally, we will have information security technologies. Modern information security includes essential business processes such as risk and policy management, but it is also heavily involved in information technology. After all, information security's mission is protecting all things IT. To scale with the power and speed of IT, information security has its own portfolio of protective and detective technologies such as firewall, endpoints, anti-malware, DLP, IDS, IPS. We will also review the below in the technologies portion. Dynamic Application Security Testing, DAST. Static Application Security Testing, SAST. Penetration Testing. Code Review. Governance, Risk, and Compliance, GRC, Platform. Integrated Risk Management, IRM, Platform. Assets are the things of value that an organization protects in an information security program. They consist of tangible things, including the following: information systems hardware, servers, laptops, tablets, mobile devices, and network devices of various sorts. Software, operating systems, subsystems, applications, and tools regardless of location. Virtual assets, operating system guests, containers, and so on. Information. Structured databases and unstructured data. Facilities. Data centers, development centers, operations centers, business offices, sales offices, retail locations, and so on. Personnel. Staff, contractors, temporary workers. Information classification. Information classification is a process whereby different sets and collections of data in an organization are analyzed for various types of value, criticality, integrity, and sensitivity. There are other ways to understand these characteristics. These are some examples. Monetary value. Some information may be easily monetized by intruders who steal it, such as credit card numbers, bank account numbers, gift certificates or cards, and discount or promotion codes. Loss of this type of information may cause direct financial losses. Operational criticality. This information must be available at all times, or perhaps the information is related to some factors of business resilience. Examples include virtual server images, incident response procedures, and business continuity procedures. Corruption or loss of this information may significantly impact ongoing business operations. Accuracy or integrity. Information in this category is required to be highly accurate. If altered, the organization could suffer significant financial or reputational harm. Examples include exchange rate tables, product or service inventory data, machine calibration data, and price lists. Corruption or loss of this information impacts business operations by causing incomplete or erroneous transactions. Sensitivity. Information is commonly associated with individual citizens, including personal contact information, financial data such as credit card and bank account numbers, and medical records. Reputational value. Another dimension of classification, denoting the potential loss of reputation should particular sensitive or critical information be lost or compromised. Information such as customers' personal information fits here. Most organizations store information that falls into all of those categories, with degrees of importance within them. Though this may result in a complex matrix of information types and degrees of importance or value, the most successful organizations will build a relatively simple information classification scheme. For instance, an organization may develop 4 levels of information classification, such as the following: secret, restricted, confidential, public. Once an organization is satisfied that its information classification is in order, it can embark on system classification. Like various information assets, information systems can also be classified according to different security and operational criteria. System classification is similar to the purpose for information criteria, to identify and categorize system assets according to the classification of information stored, processed, or transmitted by them so that an appropriate level of protection can be determined and implemented. A typical approach to system classification and protection is this: for each level of classification and each type of system, a system hardening standard is developed that specifies the features and configuration settings to be applied to the system. These settings help make the system resistant to attack, and in some cases, the grounds will help protect the information being stored, processed, or transmitted by the systems. Therefore, we will need to secure each system according to its criticality. This reflects system classification. Some examples will help illustrate these points. 1. Database management server. A database management server stores information, perhaps credit card data, at a restricted classification level. The system will be classified as restricted, and the organization will develop system hardening standards for the operating and database management systems. 2. Demilitarized zone, DMZ, firewall. A firewall protects servers located in a DMZ from threats on the Internet and protects the organization's internal assets from the DMZ if an attacker compromises an asset in the DMZ. Though the firewall does not store information, it protects information by restricting the types of traffic from the Internet to systems upon which the information resides. The organization will develop and implement hardening standards for the firewall. 3. Internet Time Server. A server provides precise time clock data to other servers, network devices, and end-user workstations. Although the time server itself does not store, process, or transmit sensitive information, it is classified as restricted because it has direct access, via time protocols and possibly other protocols, to classify as restricted assets. This server will be hardened according to hardening standards developed by the organization. Now, we understand that not all systems are created equal. With different types of data and their classifications, other systems need to be handled differently. So, if all systems are created unequally, we must apply different security standards. In this way, we will be able to identify the right tools and services to protect and secure the system accordingly to their needs. These are the values which CISM will be able to bring into the company. We live in an era of numerous information security standards and frameworks, some for many years. This enables information security managers to get a head start on developing controls, policies, and standards instead of starting with a clean slate. There are several types of frameworks in information security, and sometimes they are confused with one another. Control frameworks. CIS, CSC, ISO./IEC 27002, NIST, SP 853, PCI, DSS, NIST, CSF, COBIT, ETS Site Technical Report, TR 103-305-1, High Trust, CSF, and others. These frameworks are starting points for organizations that need to implement security controls and do not want to start from scratch. Risk Management Frameworks. ISO/IEC 27005, ISO/IEC 31000, NIST, CSF, and NIST, SP 837. These frameworks provide the blueprints for a risk management lifecycle program. Architecture frameworks. These include TOGAF and SACMAN. Security program management frameworks include ISO/IEC 27001, NIST, CSF, COBIT, and ETSI, TR 103-787-1. Note that some of these standards appear in more than one category. Some are multi-purpose in nature. For instance, NIST, CSF prescribes a risk management methodology and includes control mapping. Knowing all the standards and certifications will enable cybersecurity leaders to perform their tasks. Do you want to be the CISM whom the management can rely on and carry out the full responsibility? Security policy development is foundational to any organization's information security program. An information security policy defines the principles and required actions for the organization to adequately protect its assets and personnel. The audience for security policy is the organization's personnel, not only its full-time and part-time employees but also its temporary workers, including contractors and consultants. Security policy must be accessible by all personnel so they can never offer ignorance as an excuse for violating policy. To this point, many organizations require all personnel to acknowledge the existence of and understand the organization's security policy at the time of hire and periodically, usually annually, thereafter. Alignment with controls. Security policy and controls need to be in alignment. This is not to say that there must be a control for every policy or a policy for every control, but policies and controls must not contradict each other. For example, suppose a control states that no personally owned mobile devices may connect to internal networks. In that case, the policy cannot state that those devices may be used, provided no corporate information is stored on them. It also makes sense for the structure of policies and controls to resemble one another. This alignment makes it easier for personnel to become familiar with the structure and content of policies and controls. Alignment with the audience. Security policy needs to align with the audience. In most organizations, this means that policy statements need to be understood by most workers. A common mistake in developing security policy is the inclusion of highly technical policies such as permitted encryption algorithms or statements about the hardening of servers. Such topics are irrelevant to most workers. The danger of including policies that are irrelevant to most workers is that they are likely to tune out and not pay attention to those policies that apply to them. In other words, the security policy should have a high signal-to-noise ratio. In organizations with extensive uses of technology, one avenue is to create a general security policy for all workers, technical and non-technical, and a separate policy for technical workers who design, build, and maintain information systems. Another alternative is to create a general security policy for all workers that states that all controls are mandatory. Either approach would be sufficient by aligning messages about policy with various audiences. To sum it up, what we need to keep in mind when developing a policy. The cybersecurity leader needs to know the laws and regulations to ensure the organization will not break the law or regulation. Next will be risk tolerance. What is the risk level the company can accept? We will also need to know the controls in place. The existing controls must not affect the new controls. And what new controls will need to purchase. Finally, we will need to understand the culture, and this will provide the best understanding to implement the best program. Security metrics are often used to observe technical IT security controls and processes and determine whether they are operating correctly. This helps management better understand the impact of past decisions and can help drive future decisions. Examples of technical metrics include the following. Firewall metrics. Number and types of rules triggered. Intrusion detection, prevention system, IDPS, metrics. Number and types of incidents detected or blocked, and target systems. Anti-malware metrics. Number and types of malware blocked and targeted systems. Other security system metrics. Measurements from DLP systems, web content filtering systems, CISM systems, and so on. These metrics allow one to know whether the security is working or not. While applicable, these metrics do not address the bigger picture of the effectiveness or alignment of an organization's overall security program. They do not answer critical questions that boards of directors and executive management often ask, such as the following. How much security is enough? How should security resources be invested and applied? What is the potential impact of a threat event? We need to know and determine if it can be qualitative or quantitative. These and other business-related questions can be addressed through the appropriate metrics, as addressed in the remainder of this section. Security strategists sometimes think about metrics in simple categorization, such as the following. Key risk indicators, KRIs. Metrics associated with risk measurement. Key goal indicators, KGIs. Metrics that portray the attainment of strategic goals. Key performance indicators, KPIs. Metrics that show the efficiency or effectiveness of security-related activities. Metrics do not need to be technical, we can use other frameworks or methods to work on the metrics. For metrics to be effective, they need to be measurable. A common way to ensure the quality and effectiveness of a metric is to use the SMART method. A SMART metric is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely. Information security program management includes several activities to ensure that organizational objectives are met. These activities include resource management, staff, professional services, budget, and equipment, decision-making at every level, and coordination of activities through projects, tasks, and routine operations. We are almost halfway through our Domain 3, Keep Focus CISM. The procedures, mechanisms, systems, and other measures designed to reduce risk through compliance with policies are known as controls. An organization develops controls to ensure that its business objectives will be met, risks will be reduced, and errors will be prevented or corrected. Controls are created to ensure desired outcomes and to avoid unwanted outcomes. Controls can also seem like a checkpoint for cybersecurity leaders to know what is missing and what needs to be implemented. It also allows long-term planning and keeps the controls in place. Controls are created for several reasons. The reasons include the followings. Regulation. A regulation on cybersecurity or privacy may emphasize certain outcomes, some of which may compel an organization to develop controls. Risk assessment. A recent risk assessment or targeted risk analysis may indicate a higher than acceptable risk. The chosen risk treatment may be mitigation in the form of a new control. Audit result. The results of a recent audit may indicate a trouble spot warranting additional attention and care. Controls are important which CISM is required to know. Now we will go through the 3 types of controls, which are physical, technical, and administrative. Physical. These types of controls exist in the tangible. Physical controls include video surveillance, locking doors, bollards, and fences. Technical. These controls are usually intangible and implemented in the form of information systems and information system components. Examples of technical controls include encryption, computer access controls, and audit logs. These are sometimes referred to as logical controls. Administrative. These controls are the policies, procedures, and standards that require or forbid certain activities, protocols, and configurations. An example of administrative control is a policy that prohibits the personal use of company-owned information systems. These are sometimes referred to as managerial controls. Now, we will work on the classes of controls. There are 6 classes of controls, which speak to their relationship with unwanted outcomes. Preventive. This type of control is used to prevent the occurrence of an unwanted event. Examples of preventive controls are computer login screens, which prevent unauthorized people from accessing information, keycard systems, which prevent unauthorized people from entering a building or workspace, and encryption, which prevent people lacking an encryption key from reading encrypted data. Detective. This type of control is used to record both wanted and unwanted events. A detective control cannot enforce an activity, whether desired or undesired. Still, it can ensure that the appropriate security personnel are notified of whether and how an event occurred. Examples of detective controls include video surveillance and event logs. Deterrent. This type of control exists to convince someone that they should not perform some unwanted activity. Examples of deterrent controls include guard dogs, warning signs, and visible video surveillance cameras and monitors. Corrective. This type of control is activated, manually or automatically, after some unwanted event. An example of corrective control is improving a process when it is defective. Compensating. This type of control is enacted because some other direct control cannot be used. For example, a guest sign-in register can be a compensating control when it is implemented to compensate for the lack of a stronger detective control, such as a video surveillance system. A compensating control addresses the risk related to the original control. Recovery. This type of control is used to restore a system or an asset to its pre-incident state. Examples of a recovery control include using a tool to remove malware from a computer and backup software to recover lost or corrupted files. Now we will discuss the categories of controls. First, we will explore automatic control. This type of control performs its function with little or no human judgment or decision-making. Examples of automatic controls include a login page on an application that cannot be circumvented, and a security door that automatically locks after someone walks through the doorway. Next will be manual control. This type of control requires a human to operate it. A manual control may be subject to a higher rate of errors than an automatic control. An example of a manual control is a monthly review of computer users. Now, we will need to discuss and explore the controls to implement. Do we build or buy? The time-honored phrase build versus buy refers to fundamental business decisions that organization leaders make regularly. An organization in need of a new asset, whether tangible or intangible, can build the asset in-house by using whatever raw materials are called for and by following a design and build procedure. Or the organization can buy the finished product, that is, pay another organization to create the asset. In years past, organizations often custom designed and built their core business applications. Today, however, the majority of organizations buy, or lease, core business applications. And, increasingly, organizations no longer build their own data centers, opting to lease data center space from colocation providers or cloud providers. In part, the build versus buy argument is related to an organization's mission and core competencies. For instance, a new social media company may lease serverless computing platforms rather than buy servers, claiming that the company specializes in social media, not data centers, computer hardware, or operating systems. Controls development. The development of controls is a foundational part of any security program. To develop controls, a security manager must have an intimate knowledge of the organization's mission, goals, and objectives, as well as a good understanding of the organization's degree of risk tolerance. Diagram illustrates the relationships between an organization and the fundamentals of a security program. This is the key foundation of any security program. After the control has been designed, it needs to be serviced and managed throughout its life. Depending upon the nature of the control, this could involve operational impact in the form of changes to business processes and/or information systems. Changes with more significant impact will require more excellent care so that business processes are not adversely affected. There are many factors which need to be considered. For instance, an organization that creates a control related to implementing and managing hardening standards will need to test and implement the new control. If a production environment is affected, it takes quite a bit to ensure that the hardening standard configuration items do not adversely affect the performance, integrity, or availability of affected systems. The best will be to use existing frameworks. There are many established control frameworks in the industry. It is up to the company's cybersecurity leader to determine and identify the right framework. The implementation of a new control should be guided by formal processes, not unlike those that guide systems development. A new control should have a control objective, a design that stakeholders review, a test plan that is carried out with results reviewed, a formal authorization to implement the control, and IT and business change management processes to plan its implementation. Therefore, such controls should be tested before implementation, to gain the whole of the organization's support and approval. We also need to understand that owners should be present. Controls must have control owners, who are responsible for the proper operation of each control. When an organization implements new controls, control owners should be identified and trained on the operation of the controls they are responsible for. Ideally, control ownership and training are included in the control life cycle to ensure that control owners are identified and trained prior to the control being placed into operation. Such controls need to be audited frequently. New controls should be audited or reviewed more frequently to ensure they operate as expected. Measurements of control performance and operation should be established so that management can review actual versus expected performance. In some cases, an organization will also audit or review controls to ensure that they are meeting objectives. Latest, once these controls are put into operation, they should be monitored effectively. Controls that have been placed into service will transition into routine operations. Control owners will operate their controls and try to be aware of any problems, especially those that appear early on. Whether controls are automatic or manual, preventive or corrective, control owners are responsible for ensuring that their controls operate correctly in every respect. Modern information security control frameworks comprise a dozen or more categories of operational activities. Now we will take a look at these operational activities. Event monitoring is examining the security events that occur in information systems, including applications, operating systems, database management systems, and user devices, and every type and kind of network device, and then providing information about those events to the appropriate people or systems. Prior to widespread business use of the Internet, most organizations found it sufficient to review event logs daily. This comprised the review of the previous day's logged events, or the weekend's events on a Monday, to ensure that no security incidents warranted further investigation. Today, however, most organizations implement real-time event monitoring. This means that organizations need systems that will immediately inform the appropriate parties if any events warrant attention. Log reviews. In a log review, an event log in an information system is examined to determine whether any security or operational incidents have occurred in the system that warrants action or attention. Typically, a log review involves examining activities that occurred on the previous day. Most organizations conduct continuous log reviews by sending log data into a Security Information and Event Management System, SIEM. Centralized log management. Centralized log management is a practice whereby event logs on various systems are sent over the network to a central collection and storage point called a log server. There are two primary uses for a log server. The first is archival storage of events that may be used later in an investigation, and the second is for the review of events daily or in real time. Generally, real-time analysis is performed by a SIEM, discussed next. Security Information and Event Management. A SIEM, pronounced SIM or SIEM, system collects and analyzes log data from many or all systems in an organization. A SIEM can correlate events from one or more devices to provide details about an incident. For instance, an attacker performing a brute force password attack on a web server may be generating alerts on the web server and the firewall and intrusion detection system. A SIEM would portray the incident using events from these and possibly other devices to provide a rich depiction of the incident. Threat Intelligence Platform. Modern SIEMs can ingest threat intelligence feeds from various external sources. This enables them to correlate events in an organization's systems with various threats experienced by other organizations. A Threat Intelligence Platform, TIP, can be implemented to receive and process threat intelligence information. For example, suppose an adversary attacks another organization from a specific IP address in a foreign country. This information is included in a threat intelligence feed in your organization's SIEM. This helps the SIEM be more aware of the activity of the same type or from the same IP address. This can help your organization be prepared should similar incidents occur on your network. Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. In the context of SIEM, orchestration refers to a scripted response that is automatically or manually triggered when specific events occur. This capability is performed by a security orchestration, automation, and response (SOAR) platform that may be a standalone system or may exist as part of the SIEM. Suppose, for example, an organization has developed runbooks, or short procedures for personnel who manage the SIEM, for actions that should be performed when specific events occur. The organization, desiring to automate some of these responses, implements a SOAR tool with scripts that can be run automatically when these specific events occur. The orchestration system can be configured to run some scripts immediately, while others can be set up and run when an analyst approves them. The advantage of orchestration is twofold. First, repetitive and rote tasks are automated, relieving personnel of boredom and improving accuracy. Second, response to some types of events can be performed more quickly, thereby blunting the impact of security incidents. Vulnerability management is the practice of periodically examining information systems, including but not limited to operating systems, subsystems such as database management systems, applications, network devices, and IoT devices, to discover exploitable vulnerabilities, related analysis, and decisions about remediation. Organizations employ vulnerability management as a primary activity to reduce the likelihood of successful attacks on their IT environments. Often, one or more scanning tools, such as the following, are used to scan target systems in the search for vulnerabilities. Network device identification, open port identification, software version identification, exploitable vulnerability identification, web application vulnerability identification, source code defect identification. Security managers generally employ several of these tools for routine and non-routine vulnerability management tasks. Routine tasks include scheduled scans of specific IT assets, while non-routine duties include troubleshooting and various investigations. Process consists of the below activities: periodic scanning, analysis of scan results, delivery of scan results, remediation. Vulnerability identification techniques. Several techniques are used for identifying vulnerabilities in target systems. Security scan. One or more vulnerability scanning tools help identify easily found vulnerabilities in target systems. A security scan will identify a vulnerability in one or two ways: by confirming the version of a target system or program known to be vulnerable, or by attempting to prove the existence of a vulnerability by testing a system's response to a specific stimulus. Penetration test. A security scan, plus additional manual tests that security scanning tools do not employ, are used in a penetration test, which is intended to mimic a realistic attack by an attacker who wants to break into a target system. However, a penetration test of an organization's production environment may fall somewhat short of the techniques used by an attacker. In a penetration test, a tester is careful not to exploit vulnerabilities that could result in a malfunction of the target system. Often, an actual attacker will not take this precaution unless he or she wants to attack a system without being noticed. For this reason, conducting a penetration test of non-production infrastructure is sometimes desirable, even though non-production environments are often not identical to their production counterparts. Social engineering assessment. This is an assessment of the judgment of personnel in the organization to determine how well they can recognize various ruses used by attackers to trick users into performing tasks or providing information. Several means are used, including email, telephone calls, and in-person encounters. Social engineering assessments help organizations identify training and improvement opportunities. Social engineering attacks can have a high impact on an organization. A particular form of social engineering, BEC, business email compromise, or wire transfer fraud, consists of a ruse by which an attacker sends an email that pretends to originate from a CEO to the Chief Financial Officer, CFO, claiming that a secret merger or acquisition proceeding requires a wire transfer for a significant sum be sent to a specific offshore account. Over the past few years, aggregate losses resulting from CEO fraud exceeded $2 billion. Patch management. Closely related to vulnerability management, patch management ensures that IT systems, tools, and applications have compatible versions and patch levels. In all but most minor organizations, patch management can be successful only by using tools to automate the deployment of patches to target systems. Without automated tools, patch management is labor-intensive and prone to errors that are often unnoticed, resulting in systems that remain vulnerable to exploitation even when IT and security staff believe they are protected. Patch management is related to other IT processes, including change management and configuration management, which are discussed later in this chapter. Although engineering and software development are not activities performed in an organization's security management program, they are business processes that security managers will typically observe and occasionally influence. Most organizations do not adequately include security practices in their IT engineering and development processes, resulting in a higher than necessary number of security defects, inadequate security safeguards, and, occasionally, security breaches. Conceptual. When business executives discuss new business capabilities, lines of business, or mergers and acquisitions, security managers can weigh in on these activities with guidance on several topics, including data protection, regulations, compliance, and risk. Requirements. When requirements are being developed for developing or acquiring a new business capability, security managers can add security, compliance, and privacy requirements to improve the likelihood that systems, applications, and other capabilities are more likely to be secure. Design. With proper input at the requirements stage, Product designs are more likely to be secure. Security managers' involvement in design reviews will ensure that initiatives are heading in the right direction. Engineering and development. With security involvement in requirements and design, it's more likely that engineering and development will create secure results. Still, when engineers and developers know secure engineering and development techniques, results will be improved from a security perspective. Testing. When requirements are developed to make them measurable and verifiable, testing can include verification that requirements have been met. This will ensure that security is included properly in the engineering and development phases. Sustainment. Throughout its operational life cycle, periodic testing and analysis of threat intelligence keeps security managers informed of new vulnerabilities that require configuration changes or patches. Also, scans of an environment after routine changes help ensure that those changes do not introduce new vulnerabilities. Organizations that need to include security in each phase of their development cycles are more likely to encourage rework as protection is retrofitted into systems and applications, as opposed to these products being secure by design. Events such as risk assessments and vulnerability assessments can expose the lack of security by design, resulting in rework. Organizations unaware of the principle of security by design are often unaware that they could have performed their engineering and development for the less overall cost than the rework cost. Networks in organizations often grow organically, with incremental changes over time designed by a succession of network engineers or architects. In all but the most mature organizations, the details of network architecture and the reasons for various architectural features need to be updated and recovered to the annals of time. This results in many organizations' networks today consisting of several characteristics and features that are poorly understood, other than knowing that they are essential to the network's ongoing functionality. Firewalls are network devices used to control the passage of network traffic from one network to one or more other networks. Firewalls are typically placed at the boundary of an organization and other external networks. Organizations also use firewalls to logically separate internal networks from each other. Examples include the following. A data center network is often protected from other internal networks with the firewall. Firewalls usually protect development and testing networks. Application firewalls. Application firewalls are devices used to examine and control messages sent to an application server, primarily to block unwanted or malicious content. Most often used to protect web servers, application firewalls block attacks that may represent attempts by an attacker to gain illicit control of an application or steal data that the application server accesses. Network segmentation. Network segmentation is partitioning an organization's network into zones, with protective devices such as firewalls or stateful packet filtering routers controlling network traffic between the zones. Network segmentation protects business functions or asset groups through network-level access control. It is a common technique used to protect high-value assets by permitting network traffic from specific hosts, users, or applications to access certain networks while denying all others access. Intrusion prevention systems. Intrusion prevention systems, IPSs, detect and block malicious network traffic that may be associated with an intrusion. An IPS differs from a firewall in one important way. An IPS examines the content of network packets to determine whether each packet should be allowed to pass through the network or be blocked. A firewall decides whether to block or permit a packet based strictly on its origin, destination, and port, regardless of content. Intrusion detection systems. Intrusion detection systems, IDSs, detect malicious network traffic that may be associated with an intrusion. An IDS is functionally similar to an IPS in its detection capabilities, configurability, and detection rules. The primary difference is that an IDS is strictly a detective control. Aside from generating alerts, an IDS does nothing to prevent an attack from progressing. DDoS protection. Both appliances and cloud-based services can absorb the brunt of a distributed denial of service (DDoS) attack. This capability recognizes and filters DDoS packets while permitting legitimate traffic to pass through to the organization. DDoS protection is generally implemented at the Internet boundary in front of firewalls and other devices to prevent attacks from reaching the organization's servers. The advantage of cloud-based DDoS protection is the absence of attack traffic on the organization's Internet connection. Network traffic analysis. Network traffic analysis, NTA, is a technique used to identify anomalous network traffic that may be a part of an intrusion or other unwanted event. NTA is a strict detective tool that does not prevent unwanted traffic. In all cases, when an NTA system identifies potentially unwanted traffic, someone must take action to identify the business nature of the traffic and take steps to block it if needed. Wireless network protection. When improperly managed, a wireless network can become an avenue of attack. Older encryption protocols, such as wired equivalent privacy, WEP, are highly vulnerable to eavesdropping and intrusion. Employees and intruders may attempt to set up their wireless network access points. Weak authentication protocols may permit intruders to authenticate to wireless networks successfully. These and other types of attacks compel organizations to undertake a number of safeguards, including scanning for rogue, unauthorized access points, penetration testing of wireless networks, and monitoring of wireless access points and controllers for suspicious activity. Web content filters. A web content filter is a central network-based system that monitors and, optionally, filters web communications. The primary purpose of a web content filter is to protect the organization from the malicious content present on websites that the organization's users might visit. Cloud Access Security Broker. A Cloud Access Security Broker, CISB, is a security system that monitors and, optionally, controls users' access to Internet websites. The purpose of a CISB is to protect sensitive information by observing which service providers can be accessed by users and controlling or blocking access, as necessary. For example, suppose an organization has purchased a corporate account with the cloud-based file storage company known as Box. The CISB will be configured to block all users' access to the other cloud-based file storage vendors to prevent users from storing sensitive company data with other cloud-based file storage companies. Now, we will talk about endpoint protection and management. Endpoint now includes smartphones, tablets, laptops, and desktop computers. Endpoints are used to create, process, distribute, and store sensitive information in organizations. A single weak endpoint is all that is needed for attackers, so multiple controls need to be implemented. Endpoints are favorite targets for cybercriminal organizations for several reasons, including the following. They frequently contain sensitive information targeted by criminals. They are easily lost or stolen. Organizations need help to ensure that anti-malware and defensive configurations exist on 100% of issued endpoints. Therefore, a small percentage of endpoints are more vulnerable to malware attacks. They are often permitted to access internal corporate networks where sensitive information resides. Some users are more likely to open malicious attachments in phishing messages, resulting in a favorable chance of success for a skilled attacker who targets large numbers of users and their endpoints. Many organizations need to beta deploy security patches to all endpoints, meaning many are vulnerable to exploitable vulnerabilities for extended periods. Some users have administrative privileges, making them more attractive targets. Being quite powerful and often connected to high-speed broadband networks, endpoints make attractive intermediate systems in an attack on other systems, including relaying phishing emails and DDoS attacks. Because endpoints exist in relatively large numbers, cybercriminals know that there will always be a few endpoints that could be better protected because of one or more of these factors. These issues make corporate endpoint management a challenging job. Configuration management. Most organizations manage their endpoint populations using automated tools, which make the management of endpoints cost-effective and the configuration of endpoints far more consistent. Organizations generally employ four main techniques for effective endpoint management. Image management. An image is a binary representation of a computer's fully installed and configured operating system and applications. A typical computer support department will maintain a collection of images, with one or more images for various classes of users and various hardware makes, models and configurations. Configuration management. A typical computer support department will utilize one or more tools to manage large numbers of endpoint systems through automation. These tools are typically used to deploy patches, change configuration settings, install software programs, remove software programs, and detect configuration drift. Remote controls. Typical computer support team will use a tool that permits them to access endpoint systems remotely. Some of these tools permit covert remote access to a user's endpoint system without the user's knowledge. Most of these tools require that the end user initiate a session whereby a computer support person is granted remote access and control of an endpoint of assistance and troubleshooting. Remote destruction. If an endpoint is lost or stolen, organizations with the remote destruct capability can direct that a lost or stolen endpoint immediately destroy any locally stored data to keep it out of the hands of a criminal who may have stolen the endpoint. Laptops, tablets, and smartphones often employ this capability. We will now look at encryption and patching. Many organizations consider techniques such as whole disk encryption to protect stored information on mobile devices. This helps protect sensitive data stored on mobile devices by making it more difficult for a thief to access stored data on a stolen device. Organizations often maintain endpoint configuration standards that detail the operational and security configuration for their endpoints. Occasionally, the security configuration for endpoints will reside in a separate hardening standard document. The nature of endpoint computing and the designs of modern operating systems mean that malware is a problem that will be around for a while. On the contrary, with the advent of ransomware and destructware, malware is getting more potent and destructive. This does not diminish the impact of older generations of malware that give attackers the ability to access victim systems remotely, using remote access Trojan, or RAT, software, search for index, filtrate sensitive data, steal login credentials with keyloggers, relay spam and phishing messages, and participate in DDoS attacks against other organizations. Next will be anti-malware components. There are many types of malware. Any individual species of malware may have one or more of the following characteristics. Virus. A fragment of an executable file that can attach itself to other executable files. This type of malware exists almost exclusively on Windows operating systems, but with improvements in newer versions of Windows, viruses are less common. Trojan. A standalone program that must be executed by the end user to be activated. A Trojan typically claims to be legitimate, such as a game, but performs some malicious action. Macro. An executable file that is embedded within another file such as a document or spreadsheet file. Spyware. Malware that records one or more surveillance activities on a target system including websites visited and keystrokes, reporting back to the spyware owner. Worm. A standalone program that can propagate itself automatically from one computer to another, typically using network communications. Rootkit. Malware is designed to evade detection by anti-malware and even the operating system itself. Fileless. Malware that exists exclusively in a computer's memory, instead of in the file system. This type of malware is more difficult for traditional antivirus software to detect, as there is no file to examine for matching signatures. Ransomware. Malware performs destructive but reversible actions, such as encrypting files, which demand a ransom be paid before the destruction can be recovered. Destructware. Malware that performs some permanent destruction, such as irreversible file encryption, on a target system also known as a wiper. Remote access Trojan. A RAT is malware that provides covert remote access, visibility and control of a target system by its attacker. Keylogger. Malware that records an end user's keystrokes on a target system and then sends those keystrokes to the attacker for later analysis. formerly known as antivirus software. Anti-malware software is the presence of malware and neutralizes it before it can execute. Anti-malware utilizes several techniques to detect the presence of malware. Signatures. Time-honored but quickly becoming obsolete, signature detection involves matching known malware with new files being introduced to the system. A match means malware has been detected. Process observation. Anti-malware observes the behavior of processes running in the operating system and generally knows the types of actions that each process will take. When anti-malware detects a process acting not typical of a given process, it will terminate the process. Sandbox. Anti-malware will first install new files in a sandbox, a virtual container where the files will be permitted to execute. If the files behave like malware in the sandbox, they will not be permitted to execute in the system. In some products, the sandbox resides in the endpoint, but in other products, the sandbox resides in the cloud. Deception. Anti-malware will use some technique to scramble the operating system's memory map so that malware cannot attack processes' memory images. Application whitelisting. Organizations can use security tools that employ application whitelisting, which permits only registered or recognized programs to execute on a system. This approach can prevent malware from executing on an endpoint and can also be used to manage policy concerning what software is permitted to be run on systems. Finally, virtual desktops will be endpoint detection and response. Endpoint detection and response, EDR, represents an expansion of protective capabilities employed on endpoints. Beyond anti-malware, EDR solutions employ additional capabilities, such as application whitelisting, intrusion detection, web content filtering, firewall, data loss prevention, and others, all in an integrated solution. EDR provides more comprehensive protection than anti-malware alone. An extended detection and response XDR system is an EDR system with extended capabilities, such as having additional features or being SIS-based. Identity and Access Management, IAM, represents business processes and technologies used to manage the identities of workers and systems and their access to systems and information. Identity management manages the identity and access history of each employee, contractor, temporary worker, supplier worker, and, optionally, customer. These records are then used to control which workplaces, applications, IT systems, and business functions each person is permitted to use. When organizations had few business applications, organizations provisioned users access to each separate application. As organizations began to implement additional applications, users had more credentials to use. With the mass migration to cloud-based applications, the number of credentials users had to remember spiraled out of control, leading to unsafe habits, including using the same credentials across many applications and writing down credentials where they could be easily discovered. IT service desks were inundated with password reset requests from users who could not effectively manage their growing portfolio of certificates. Amount of credentials needed to be managed can go out of control without proper processes and tools. As a result of these developments, organizations began to centralize their IAM systems so that users had to manage fewer credentials. Organizations implemented reduced sign-on and single sign-on to simplify access for users, which also reduced the effort required by IT to handle users' access. Another advantage came from less effort needed to manage user credentials. For instance, when an employee leaves the organization, only the user's single access credential for all applications could be locked or removed, effectively locking the terminated user out of all of the organization's business applications. Organizations realized that the Achilles heel of reduced sign-on and single sign-on was this: if a user's sole set of credentials were compromised, the attacker would have access to all of the applications to which the user had access. As a result, organizations responded by implementing MFA, whereby a user is required to provide a user ID, a password, and an additional identifier that typically resides in a smart card, mobile phone, or smartphone. Organizations can also implement biometrics, which is a form of MFA. The advantage of MFA is that cases of the user ID and password compromise do not permit an attacker to access information unless they also have the user's mobile device in their possession. The use of user IDs, passwords, and MFA is giving way to passwordless authentication, where authentication consists of an end user providing a user ID together with the second factor such as a hardware token or biometric. Often, access operations are performed by the IT department, while access reviews and recertifications are performed by information security as a form of a check and balance system. It would not make sense for IT to perform access reviews because they would be checking their work, and employees performing these reviews might be tempted to cover up their mistakes. Access governance. Access governance refers to developing policies, business rules, and controls concerning access to assets and information. These activities ensure that access management operations are adequately managed. Access operations. IAM is an activity-filled discipline that involves everyday activities such as the following: provisioning access to new workers, adjusting access rights to workers being transferred, assisting workers with access issues such as forgotten passwords, assisting workers whose accounts have been locked out for various reasons, removing access from departing workers. Less routine events in IAM include these project-related activities: integrating a new business application with the centralized authentication service, resetting a user's credentials in response of the loss of a laptop computer or mobile device. Access reviews. In an access review, management reviews users' access to information and information systems. The purpose of an access review is to confirm that all the workers who have access to information or an information system still require that access. An access review also ensures that any subject no longer requires access to information or that an information system has that access removed. Access reviews take on different forms, including the following: analysis of a single user's access to all information and information systems, analysis of all users' access to an information system, analysis of all users with a particular set of access rights to one or more information systems. Various regulations require access reviews. This requires that personnel who perform access reviews produce a record of the evaluation, including all of the users whose access was examined and specific actions taken due to the review. Segregation of duties. In managing user access schemes, security managers will recognize that several high-value and high-risk roles in business processes are implemented in information systems and applications. Segregation of duties, aka separation of duties, helps ensure that no single individual possesses privileges that could result in unauthorized activities or the manipulation or exposure of sensitive data. The purpose of the segregation of duties is to require that two or more people perform high-value and high-risk activities. This makes it far more difficult for individuals to defraud the organization. For example, segregation of duties is important to avoid a single individual being able to request a user account and provision that user account. It's also important to avoid theft and other malicious activities. For example, an accounting department can allocate roles to individuals so that no single individual can create a vendor, request a payment, and approve payment to the vendor. If this combination of access rights were granted to a single individual, it could be tempting for the employee to set up a fictitious vendor and then send payments to that vendor. In a segregation of duties access review, the security manager examines user access rights to various high-risk and high-value roles to determine whether any individuals have access to more than one role within these functions. Any such findings are identified, and corrective actions are applied. In some situations, particularly in smaller organizations, there may need to be more personnel to separate high-value and high-risk activities between two or more persons. In such cases, security managers should recommend that detailed activity reviews be performed periodically to ensure that no fraudulent or erroneous activities occur. In high-risk and high-value activities, activity reviews often occur anyway. Still, when segregation of duties cannot be achieved, these reviews may appear more often or be more thorough. Privileged and high-risk roles. Information systems and applications typically have roles for ordinary users, as well as roles that are administrative in nature. These administrative roles are granted a number of high-risk capabilities, including creating user accounts, system configuration, and alteration of records. These privileged roles often warrant more frequent and more thorough reviews to ensure that the fewest possible numbers of workers are granted these roles. Activity reviews. An activity review is an examination of an information system to determine which users have been active and which have not. The primary purpose of an access review is to identify user accounts that have had no activity for an extended period, typically 90 days. The rationale is that if a user has not used an application in more than 90 days, the person probably does not require access to that system. Removing or locking such a user's access helps reduce the risk of compromise. If the user's credentials were compromised, they could not be used to access the system. An activity review is a corrective control that helps reduce the accumulation of privileges. Access recertification. Access recertification is a periodic review in which information system owners review lists of users and their roles and determine each user and role whether their access is still required. Like other reviews, personnel often create a business record showing which users and roles were examined and what corrective actions were applied. Access recertification is a corrective control that helps reduce the accumulation of privileges. User behavior analytics. User Behavior Analytics, UBA, sometimes known as End-User Behavior Analytics, EUBA, represents an emerging technology whereby individual users' behaviors are baselined, and anomalous activity triggers events or alarms. UBA systems work by observing users' behavior over time and creating events or notices when user behavior deviates from the norm. UBA is one of several forms of behavior anomaly detection that helps organizations detect unauthorized employee activities or find attackers who have successfully compromised their user accounts. UBA capabilities can exist in many different contexts. For example, a cloud-based file storage service can establish baselines for each user and report incidents where individual users upload or download copious amounts of information. Or an application can baseline each user's behavior and report on anomalies such as unusually large dollar value transactions and other atypical activity. UBA capabilities can counter insider threats, a broad category of threats ranging from errors and poor judgment to malice, including information theft and fraud, as well as malware on a user's computer performing actions unknown to the user. User and Entity Behavior Analytics, UEBA, is functionally similar, if not identical, to EUBA and UBA. Many organizations have centralized logging, SIEM, vulnerability scanning, and other capabilities, but these organizations need to be more significant to warrant staffing a Security Operations Center, SOC, 24/7/365. To ensure complete coverage, including coverage for sick days, vacations, holidays, and training, 12 personnel may be required to staff a SOC, not counting the SOC manager, software licenses and the necessary equipment and space. For this reason, many organizations outsource the monitoring of their SIEMs and related activities to a managed security services provider, MSSP, aka MSS. Modern MSSP's capabilities include the following: Managed SIEM, Managed Vulnerability Scanning, Managed Data Loss Prevention, Managed Endpoint Security Monitoring, Managed Detection and Response, MDR, Security Incident Response and Forensics, MSSPs monitor events and incidents in dozens or hundreds of customer organizations and have a large staff to ensure complete coverage at peak workloads. Because qualified security personnel can be challenging to attract and retain, many organizations are turning to MSSPs to offload routine tasks and free themselves of the burden of staffing and running a SOC. Organizations that outsource parts of their security operations to an MSSP need to be mindful of several considerations, including the following. Operational partnership. An MSSP typically performs a monitoring function but, in most cases, does not take remedial action. Therefore, when the MSSP identifies an actionable incident, it hands off the incident to someone in the customer organization to take the necessary action. Service-level agreements. An MSSP typically publishes a schedule of SLAs so that customers understand how responsive the MSSP will be in various scenarios. Organizations should regularly test their MSSP to verify that events are being monitored and comply with the SLAs for alerting in response to events. Data governance is the collection of management activities and policies that seek to enforce business rules concerning access to and use of data. ISACA defines data security as those controls that seek to maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. Data security is the heart of everything concerned with information security laws, standards, and practices. Several topics concerning data security are discussed here, including some of the following. Access management. Backup and recovery. Data classification. Data loss prevention. Cloud access security brokers. Access management. Access management is part of the broader discipline of IAM. This topic is described in detail earlier in this chapter in the Identity and Access Management section. Let us look at each in detail. Backup and recovery. Many events can damage information, and some circumstances compel an organization to revert to earlier versions of information. Copies of stored information must exist elsewhere and in a form that enables IT personnel to load this information into systems so that processing can resume as quickly as possible. Backup to tape and other media. In organizations still utilizing their IT infrastructure, tape backup is just about as ubiquitous as power cords. From a disaster recovery perspective, the issue is probably not whether the organization has tape backup but whether its current backup capabilities are adequate in disaster recovery. There are times when an organization's backup capability may need to be upgraded. If the current backup system is challenging to manage. If whole system restoration takes too long. If the system lacks flexibility concerning disaster recovery, for instance, a high level of difficulty would be required to recover information onto a different type of system. If the technology is old or outdated. If confidence in the backup technology is low. Many organizations may consider tape backup as a means for restoring files or databases when errors have occurred, and they may have confidence in their backup system for that purpose. However, the organization may need more confidence in its backup system and its ability to recover all of its critical systems accurately and promptly. While tape has been the default backup medium since the 1960s, using hard drives and solid-state drives, SSDs, as backup media is growing in popularity, hard disk transfer rates are far higher, and SSDs higher still, and disks/SSD are random access media, whereas tape is a sequential access medium. A virtual tape library, VTL, data storage technology sets up a disk-based storage system with the appearance of tape storage, permitting existing backup software to continue to back data up to tape, which is just more disk storage. E-vaulting is another viable option for system backup. E-vaulting permits organizations to back up their systems and data to an off-site location, a storage system in another data center or a third-party service provider. This accomplishes two important objectives: reliable backup and off-site backup data storage. Note: backups have always been a critical activity in IT. Ransomware has served to highlight its importance still further. Backup schemes. 3 main schemes are used for backing up data. Full backup. A complete copy of a dataset. Incremental backup. A copy of all data that has changed since the last full or incremental backup. Differential backup. A copy of all data that has changed since the last full backup. The precise nature of the data to be backed up will determine which combination of backup schemes is appropriate for the organization. Some of the considerations for choosing an overall scheme include the following: criticality of the dataset, size of the dataset, frequency of change of the dataset, performance requirements and the impact of backup jobs, recovery requirements. An organization creating a backup scheme usually starts with the most common scheme, which is a full backup once per week and an incremental or differential backup every day. However, as stated previously, various factors will influence the design of the final backup scheme. Here are some examples. A small data set could be backed up more than once a week, while an extensive data set may be backed up less often. A more rapid recovery requirement may induce the organization to perform differential backups instead of incremental backups. If a full backup takes a long time to complete, it should probably be performed during times of lower demand or system utilization. Data classification. A data classification policy defines sensitivity levels and handling procedures for protecting information. Data classification relies partly on human judgment and partly on automation to prevent the misuse and compromise of sensitive information. Data loss prevention. Data loss prevention, DLP, represents a variety of capabilities by which the movement and storage of sensitive data can be detected and, optionally, controlled. DLP technology is considered a content-aware control that some organizations use to detect and even control the storage, transmission, and use of sensitive data. There are 2 main types of DLP systems. Static DLP. These tools scan unstructured data storage systems for sensitive information. They can effectively discover sensitive data that personnel copy to file servers. Often, users will export sensitive data from a business application to a spreadsheet and store that data on a file server or cloud-based file storage service. Sometimes this sensitive data is readable by most or all organization personnel and even personnel outside the organization. Dynamic DLP. These tools reside in or communicate with file storage systems, USB-attached removable storage devices, and ML systems. They are used to detect and even block the movement of sensitive data. Depending on the nature of the data being moved, users may be warned of the activity they are undertaking, or their actions may be blocked. Implementing DLP systems is challenging, mainly because organizations must thoroughly understand how sensitive and critical data is stored and used. A DLP system can inadvertently block legitimate uses of data while permitting undesired actions. Digital rights management. Digital rights management, DRM, represents access control technologies used to control the distribution and use of electronic content. Still considered an emerging technology in practice, DRM exists today in relatively narrow usage models and has yet to be widely adopted in general ways. Current capabilities include the following: software license keys, copy restriction of music CDs and movie DVDs, Adobe Acrobat PDF document restriction, Microsoft Office document restriction. These uses are proprietary and exist as islands of control, as no standards work across multiple technologies or use. I hope you have a better idea of the key areas covered. We will cover encryption in more detail in the next lesson before we move on to Domain 4. Domain 4 comprises 30% of the overall CISM information security management areas. It is called incident management and comprises 2 topics mainly, which are: firstly, incident management readiness, and lastly, incident management operations. Incidents are a reality in any environment. No matter how many security controls you implement, an incident will always happen. This is not just restricted to security but will cover business continuity and disaster recovery situations. Without any delay, let's start the trolling, CISM. Our world is full of surprises, including events that disrupt our plans and activities. In the context of IT and business, several unexpected events can cause significant disruption to business operations, even to the point of threatening the ongoing viability of the organization itself. These events include natural disasters, human-made disasters, malicious acts, cyber attacks, and changes with unintended consequences. Incident management readiness begins with upfront analyses of business processes and their dependence upon business assets, including information systems. This analysis includes a big-picture prioritization of business processes and an up-close examination of business processes and information systems. This is followed by developing contingency, response, and restoration plans. A natural byproduct of this effort is improved resilience of business processes and information systems even if disruptive events never occur because overall weaknesses in processes and systems are identified, leading to steps to make tactical improvements. Although security incident response, business continuity planning, BCP, and disaster recovery planning, DRP, are often considered separate disciplines, they share a common objective: the best possible continuity of business operations during and after a disruptive threat event. Therefore, the security incident response plan will cover cybersecurity and business continuity. A ransomware event might occur when an attacker damages or destroys information or systems. An incident of this type may necessarily require security incident response, BCP, and DRP. Security incident response is enacted to discover the techniques used by the attacker to compromise systems so that any vulnerabilities can be remediated, thereby preventing similar attacks in the future. Business continuity response is required to operate critical business processes without primary processing systems. Disaster recovery planning is needed to recover its systems and resume normal operations as quickly as possible. Security incident response, business continuity, and disaster recovery require planning so that the organization will have discussed, documented, and outlined the responses required for various types of incidents in advance of their occurrence. Planning is essential. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So, the more you plan, the better you are prepared. Risk assessments are the foundation of planning for all three disciplines because organizations must discover relevant risks and establish priorities during a response. Additionally, by taking this proactive approach, the team will have a framework to lean on for incidents that may not have been considered otherwise. Now, we will explore the security incident response overview. A security incident is an event that compromises or may compromise the CI of an information system. It will touch on any of the trial corners. So, what is CIA? Can you still remember? CIA refers to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. As a result of a security incident, the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of information, or an information system, has been or is in danger of being compromised. A security incident can also be any event representing a violation of an organization's security policy. For instance, if an organization's security policy states that it is not permitted for one person to use another person's computer account, then such use that results in the disclosure of the information would be considered a security incident. Several types of security incidents can occur. Computer account abuse. Examples include willful account abuse, such as sharing user account credentials with other insiders or outsiders or one person stealing login credentials from another. Computer or network trespass. An unauthorized person accesses a computer network. The methods of trespass include malware, using stolen credentials, access bypass, or gaining physical access to the computer or network and connecting to it directly. Information exposure or theft. Information protected by one or more controls may still be exposed to unauthorized people through a weakness in controls or by deliberate or negligent acts or omissions. For instance, An intruder may be able to intercept email messages, client-server communication, file transfers, login credentials, and network diagnostic information. Or a vulnerability in a system may permit an intruder to compromise the system and obtain information stored or processed there. Malware, a worm or a virus outbreak may occur in an organization's network. The outbreak may disrupt normal business operations simply through the malware's spread, or the malware may also damage infected systems in other ways, including destroying or altering information. Malware can also eavesdrop on communications and send intercepted sensitive information back to its source. Ransomware and wiperware. A malware attack may include ransomware, where critical data is encrypted, and a ransom is demanded in exchange for a decryption key. Variations of ransomware attacks include the exfiltration of critical data with the threat of posting the data publicly and wipers that destroy data instead of encrypting it. Denial of service, DOS, attack. An attacker floods a target computer or network with the volume of traffic that overwhelms the target so that it cannot carry out its regular functions. For example, an attacker might flood an online banking website with so much traffic that the bank's depositors cannot use it. Sending traffic that causes the target to malfunction or cease functioning is another form of a DOS attack. Both types result in the malfunction of the target system. Distributed denial of service, DDoS, attacks. Similar to a DOS attack, a DDoS attack emanates simultaneously from hundreds or thousands of computers that comprise a botnet. A DDoS attack can be brutal because of the volume of incoming messages and many attacking systems. Encryption or destruction of critical information. A ransomware or wiper attack can result in encrypted or destroyed information. Disclosure of sensitive information. Any sensitive information may be disclosed to any unauthorized party. Information system theft. Laptop computers, mobile devices, and other information processing and storage equipment can be stolen, which may directly or indirectly lead to further compromises. If the stolen device contains retrievable sensitive information or the means to access sensitive information stored elsewhere, what started as a theft of a tangible asset may expand to become a compromise of sensitive information. Information system damage. A human intruder or automated malware may cause temporary or irreversible damage to information or an information system. This may result in an interruption in the availability of information and permanent loss of information. Information corruption. A human intruder or automated malware such as a worm or virus may damage information stored on a system. This damage may or may not be readily noticed. Misconfiguration. An error made by an IT worker can result in data loss or system malfunction. Sabotage. A human intruder or automated malware attack may disrupt or damage information systems, or facilities in a single organization, several organizations in a market sector, or an entire nation. With all the security incidents explained, the last for us to know that security incident response overview can differ by severity as well. As for any emergency, the best time to plan for security incident response is prior to the start of any actual incident. During an incident is a poor time to analyze the situation thoughtfully, conduct research, and work out the sequence of events that should take place to restore normal operations quickly and effectively. Emotions may run high, and there may be a heightened sense of urgency, especially if there has been little or no advanced planning. Effective incident response plans take time to develop. A security manager developing an incident response plan must thoroughly understand the organization's business processes and underlying information systems and discover resource requirements, dependencies, and failure points. A security manager may first develop a high-level incident response plan, which is usually followed by the development of several incident response playbooks, the step-by-step instructions to follow when specific types of security incidents occur. Objectives. Similar to any intentional activity, organizations need to establish their objectives prior to undertaking an effort to develop security incident response plans. Otherwise, whether business needs are being met may need to be clarified. Following are some objectives that may apply to many organizations. First, minimal or no interruption to customer-facing or revenue-producing business operations. Second, no loss of critical information. Third, recovery of lost or damaged information within DRP and BCP recovery targets, mainly Recovery Point Objective, RPO. Fourth, the least possible disclosure to affected parties. Fifth, least possible disclosure to regulators. Lastly, the least possible disclosure to shareholders. Maturity. The organization should consider its current and desired maturity levels when undertaking any effort to develop or improve business processes. As a quick reminder, the levels of maturity according to the Capability Maturity Model Integration for Development, CMMIDEV, are as follows. The first step will be initial. This represents a process that is ad hoc, inconsistent, unmeasured, and unrepeatable. The second step is repeatable. This represents a process that is performed consistently and with the same outcome. It may or may not be well documented. Third will be defined. This represents a well-defined and documented. The last step will be managed. This represents a quantitatively measured process with one or more metrics. Resources. Security incident response requires resources. Security managers should keep this in mind when developing incident response plans. Each stage of incident response, from detection to closure, requires the involvement of personnel with all the sets and various tools that enable personnel to detect an incident, analyze it, contain it, and eradicate it. Various types of incidents require various tools and skills. Personnel is the heart of security incident response. Effective security incident response requires personnel with a variety of skills, including the following. First will be incident detection and analysis. Security Operations Center, SOC, analysts and other personnel use a variety of monitoring tools that alert them when actionable events occur. This personnel receive alerts and proceeds to analyze an incident by drilling into the details. These people may also undertake threat hunting, proactively searching systems and networks for signs of reconnaissance, malicious command and control, CNC, traffic, and intrusion. This function is often outsourced to managed security service providers, MSSPs, that run large 24/7/365 operations, monitoring hundreds or thousands of client organizations' networks. Next, we will discuss network, system, and application subject matter experts, SMEs. With expertise in the network devices, systems, and applications related to alerts, this personnel can help SOC analysts and others better understand the meaning behind incidents and their consequences. Then will be malware analysis and reverse engineering. This personnel use tools to identify and analyze malware to understand better what it does on a system and how it communicates with other systems. This helps the organization to decide how to contain the incident and defend itself against similar attacks in the future. Fourth will be forensics. These persons use tools and techniques to collect evidence that helps the organization better understand the nature of the incident. A chain of custody may protect some evidence in anticipation of later legal proceedings. Next will be incident command and control. These personnel have expertise in overall security incident response and take charge during an incident. Generally, this type of coordination is required only in high-impact incidents involving multiple parties in an organization and external entities such as customers, regulators, and law enforcement. Now we will talk about crisis communications. This personnel are skilled in internal communications and communications with external parties, including regulators, shareholders, customers, and the public. Then will be legal, privacy. One or more people in the organization's legal department will read and interpret applicable laws and make decisions related to external communications with customers, regulators, law enforcement, shareholders, and other parties. Business unit leaders are also department heads. This person will be called to make critical business decisions during an incident. Examples include decisions to take systems offline or transfer work to other processing centers. Executives are the top leaders in the organization who need to be consistently informed and will be called upon to ratify or make crucial decisions. Lastly, law enforcement personnel in external agencies may be able to assist in incident investigation. Optimizing represents a measured process that is under continuous improvement. When we talk about incident response plan development, this is a significant development. Incident response plan development is also known as phase-wise development. It will start with a gap analysis. Before developing a security incident response plan, the security manager must determine the current state of the organization's incident response capabilities and a desired end state, for example, a completed security incident response plan with specific capabilities and characteristics. A gap analysis is the best way for the security manager to understand what capabilities and resources are lacking. Once gaps are known, a strategy for developing security includes response plans that will create or acquire all necessary resources and personnel. Plan development. A security incident response plan is a document that defines policies, roles, responsibilities, and actions to be taken in the event of a security incident. Often, a response plan defines and describes roles, responsibilities, and actions related to detecting a security incident. Considering the high velocity and impact of specific security incidents, this portion of an incident response plan is vital. A security incident response plan typically includes these 6 sections: policy, roles and responsibilities, incident detection capabilities, playbooks, communications, record keeping. We need to be as detailed as possible with the development. Recognizing that there are many types of security incidents, each with its impacts and issues, many organizations develop a collection of incident response playbooks that provide step-by-step instructions for incidents likely to occur. A set of playbooks may include procedures for the following 12 incidents. Number 1, lost or stolen laptop computer. Number 2, lost or stolen mobile device. Number 3, extortion and wire fraud. Number 4, sensitive data exfiltration. Number 5, malware, ransomware, and wipers. Number 6, stolen or compromised user credentials. Number 7, critical vulnerability. Number 8, externally reported vulnerability. Number 9, DOS attack. Number 10, unauthorized access. Number 11, violation of information security-related law, regulation, or contract. Number 12, business email compromise. During a severe incident, emotions can run high, and personnel under stress may not be able to remember all the steps required to handle an incident properly. Playbooks help guide experienced and trained personnel in examining, containing, and recovering from an incident. They are commonplace in other industries. Pilots and astronauts use playbooks to handle various emergencies. For example, they practice the steps to help them prepare to respond effectively when needed. Such development needs to be tested regularly to ensure they are effective. Periodic updates. All security incident management documents must be periodically reviewed by all responsible parties, SMEs, and management to ensure that all agree on the policies, roles and responsibilities, and steps required to detect, contain, and recover from an incident. Generally, organizations should review and update documents at least once yearly, anytime a significant change is made in an organization or its supporting systems. Business Impact Analysis, BIA, studies business processes in an organization to understand their relative criticality, their dependencies upon resources, and how they are affected when interruptions occur. The objective of the BI is to identify the impact that different business disruption scenarios will have on ongoing business operations. The results of the BI drive subsequent activities, namely, BCP and DRP. The BI is one of several steps of critical, detailed analysis that must be carried out before developing continuity or recovery plans and procedures. The first step in a BI is identifying critical business processes and supporting IT systems. Within the overall scope of a BCP project, The objective is to establish a detailed list of all identifiable processes and systems. The process usually begins with developing a questionnaire or intake form circulated to key personnel in end-user departments and within IT. When all of the BIDA information has been collected and charted, a criticality analysis can be performed. Criticality analysis studies each system and process, considering the impact on the organization if incapacitated, the likelihood of incapacitation, and the estimated cost of mitigating the risk or impact. In other words, it's a somewhat special type of risk analysis that focuses on key processes and systems. The criticality analysis should also include a vulnerability analysis, aka vulnerability assessment, an examination of a process or system to identify vulnerabilities that, if exploited, could incapacitate or harm the process or system. Determine maximum tolerable downtime. The next step for each critical process is the establishment of a maximum tolerable downtime, MTD, aka acceptable interruption window, IW. This theoretical period is measured from the onset of a disaster, at which point the organization's survival is at risk. Establishing MTD for each critical process is an important step that aids in the establishment of key recovery targets. Determine maximum tolerable outage. Next, the maximum tolerable outage, MTO, metric must be determined. MTO measures the maximum time an organization can tolerate operating in recovery, or alternate processing, mode. This metric comes into play when systems and processes in recovery mode operate at a lower level of throughput, consistency, quality, and integrity or higher cost. MTO drives the need to re-establish normal production operations within a specific period. We will explore more on how to establish recovery targets. Recovery point objective. Generally, the RPO equates to the maximum period between backups or data replication intervals. It is generally measured in minutes or hours, and like RTO, shorter RPO targets are typically associated with higher costs. The value of a system's RPO is usually a direct backup or replication frequency or replication. For example, if an application server is backed up once per day, the RPO will be at least 24 hours, or 1 day, whichever way you would like to express it. Maybe it will take 3 days to rebuild the server, but once data is restored from the backup tape, no more than the last 24 hours of transactions are lost. In this case, the RTO is 3 days, and the RPO is 1 day. Recovery time objective. The RTO establishes a measurable interval during which the necessary activities for recovering or resuming business operations must occur. Various business processes in an organization will have different RTO targets, and some business processes will have RTOs that vary according to business cycles on a daily, weekly, monthly, or annual basis. For instance, point-of-sale terminals may have a short RTO during peak business hours, a longer RTO during less busy hours, and a longer RTO when the business is closed. Similarly, financial and payroll systems will have shorter RTOs during critical processing times, such as payroll cycles and financials at the end of the month. RTOs, data classification, and asset classification are all interrelated. Business processes with shorter RTOs will likely have data and assets classified as more operationally critical. Now, we will focus on the business continuity plan. BCP reduces risks related to the onset of disasters and other disruptive events. BCP activities identify risks and mitigate those risks through changes or enhancements in business processes or technology so that the impact of disasters is reduced and the time to recovery is lessened. The primary objective of BCP is to improve the chances that the organization will survive a disaster without incurring costly or even fatal damage to its most critical activities. Business continuity planning is closely related to disaster recovery planning. Both are concerned with the recovery of business operations after a disaster. DRP is undertaken to reduce risks related to the onset of disasters and other events. It is mainly an IT function to ensure that key IT systems are available to support critical business processes. DRP is closely related to, but somewhat separate from, BCP. The groundwork for DRP begins in BCP activities such as the business impact analysis, criticality analysis, establishment of recovery objectives, and testing. The outputs from these activities are the key inputs to DRP. Types of disasters. BCP professionals broadly classify disasters as natural or human-made, although the origin of a disaster does not figure very much into how we respond to it. Let's take a look at a few. Natural disasters. Natural disasters occur in the natural world with little or no human assistance. They result from the natural processes in, on, and above the earth. Here are examples of natural disasters. Earthquakes. Sudden movements of the earth with the capacity to damage buildings, houses, roads, bridges, and dams, precipitate landslides and avalanches, and induce flooding and other secondary events. Floods. Standing or moving water spills out of its banks, flows into and through buildings, and causes significant damage to roads, buildings, and utilities. Flooding can result from locally heavy rains, heavy snowmelt, a dam or levee break, tropical cyclone storm surge, or an avalanche or landslide that displaces lake or river water. So far, we have shared BCP development and DRP plan development. If you need clarification, revisit the prior videos to understand the concepts. We need to know that such development is not a one-time activity. BCP has a life cycle and is a professional step for us to follow. I will share the life cycle shortly. Another thing we need to know is that cybersecurity is a top-down approach. Therefore, it needs to be owned by management. When top management is involved, we will need a proper follow-up to ensure the resources spent are accounted for. Therefore, a core team needs to be formed. Just like anything else, we need to consider and take note that human life is always the top priority. Safety is the key. We will share about the BCP process life cycle. The following are the steps of the BCP process life cycle. Step 1. Assign ownership of the program. Step 2 is, develop a BCP policy. Step 3 is, conduct a business impact analysis. Step 4, perform criticality analysis. Step 5, establish recovery targets. Step 6, define KRIs and KPIs. Step 7, develop recovery and continuity strategies and plans. Step 8, test recovery and continuity plans and procedures. Step 9, test integration of business continuity and disaster recovery plans. Step 10, train personnel. Step 11, maintain strategies, plans, and procedures through periodic reviews and updates. A formal BCP effort must, like any strategic activity, flow from the existence of a formal policy and be included in the overall governance model. Now we will talk about backup and recovery. This is very important and helpful in your daily work. Backup and recovery. Many types of events can damage information, and some circumstances compel an organization to revert to earlier versions of information. Copies of stored information must exist elsewhere and in a form that enables IT personnel to load this information easily into systems so that processing can resume as quickly as possible. Backup to tape and other media. In organizations still utilizing their own IT infrastructure, tape backup is just about as ubiquitous as power cords. From a disaster recovery perspective, however, the issue probably is not whether the organization has tape backup but whether its current backup capabilities are adequate in the context of disaster recovery. There are times when an organization's backup capability may need to be upgraded. If the current backup system is challenging to manage. If whole system restoration takes too long. If the system lacks flexibility concerning disaster recovery, for instance, a high level of difficulty would be required to recover information onto a different type of system. If the technology needs to be updated or updated. If confidence in the backup technology is low. Many organizations may consider tape backup as a means for restoring files or databases when errors have occurred, and they may have confidence in their backup system for that purpose. However, the organization may have somewhat less confidence in its backup system and its ability to recover all of its critical systems accurately and in a timely manner. While tape has been the default backup medium since the 1960s, using hard drives and solid-state drives, SSDs, as backup media is growing in popularity, hard disk transfer rates are far higher, and SSDs higher still, and disks/SSD are random access media, whereas tape is a sequential access medium. A virtual tape library, VTL, data storage technology sets up a disk-based storage system with the appearance of tape storage, permitting existing backup software to continue to back data up to tape, which is really just more disk storage. E-vaulting is another viable option for system backup. E-vaulting permits organizations to back up their systems and data to an off-site location, a storage system in another data center or a third-party service provider. This accomplishes two important objectives: reliable backup and off-site storage of backup data. Note: backups have always been a critical activity in IT. Ransomware has served to highlight its importance still further. Backup schemes. Three main schemes are used for backing up data. Full backup, a complete copy of a dataset. Incremental backup, a copy of all data that has changed since the last full or incremental backup. Differential backup, a copy of all data that has changed since the last full backup. The precise nature of the data to be backed up will determine which combination of backup schemes is appropriate for the organization. Some of the considerations for choosing an overall scheme include the following: criticality of the dataset, size of the dataset, frequency of change of the dataset, performance requirements and the impact of backup jobs, recovery requirements. An organization creating a backup scheme usually starts with the most common scheme, a full backup once per week and an incremental or differential backup every day. However, as stated previously, various factors will influence the design of the final backup scheme. Here are some examples. A small data set could be backed up more than once a week, while an especially large data set may be backed up less often. A more rapid recovery requirement may induce the organization to perform differential backups instead of incremental backups. If a full backup takes a long time to complete, it should probably be performed during times of lower demand or system utilization. Site recovery options. In a worst-case disaster scenario, the site where information systems reside is partially or wholly destroyed. In most cases, the organization cannot afford to wait for the damaged or destroyed facility to be restored because this could take weeks or months. If an organization can take that long to recover an application, you'd have to wonder whether it is needed. The assumption must be that the organization will recover critical applications at another location in a disaster scenario. This other location is called a recovery site. There are two dimensions to choosing a recovery site: the speed at which the application will be recovered at the recovery site and the location of the recovery site itself. Hot sites. A hot site is an alternate processing center where backup systems are already running and in some near readiness to assume production workload. The systems at a hot site most likely have the application software and database management software already loaded and running, perhaps even at the same patch levels as the systems in the primary processing center. A hot site is the best choice for systems whose RTO targets range from 0 to several hours, perhaps as long as 24 hours. Warm sites. A warm site is an alternate processing center where recovery systems are present but at a lower state of readiness than recovery systems at a hot site. For example, while the same operating system version may be running on the warm site system, it may be a few patch levels behind primary systems. The same could be said about the versions and patch levels of DBMSs, if used, and application software. Cold sites. A cold site is an alternate processing center where the degree of readiness for recovery systems is low. At the least, a cold site is nothing more than an empty rack or allocated space on a computer room floor. It's just an address in someone's data center or co-location site where computers can be set up and used at some future date. Often, cold sites contain little or no equipment. When a disaster or other highly disruptive event occurs in which the outage is expected to exceed 7 to 14 days, the organization will order computers from a manufacturer or perhaps have computers shipped from some other business location to arrive at the cold site soon after the disaster event has begun. The personnel would travel to the site, set up the computers, operating systems, databases, network equipment, and so on, and get applications running within several days. Mobile site. A mobile site is a portable recovery center that can be delivered to almost any location worldwide. A viable alternative to a fixed location recovery site, a mobile site can be transported by semi-trailer truck and may even have its generator, communications, and cooling capabilities. APC and SunGuard provide mobile sites installed in semis. Oracle can provide mobile sites that include a configurable selection of servers and workstations, all housed in shipping containers that can be shipped by truck, rail, ship, or air to any location in the world. Cloud sites. Organizations are increasingly using cloud hosting services as their recovery sites. Such sites charge for utilizing servers and devices in virtual environments. Hence, capital cost for recovery sites is negligible, and operational costs come into play as recovery sites are used. As organizations become accustomed to building recovery sites in the cloud, they are, with increasing frequency, moving their primary processing sites to the cloud as well. Reciprocal sites. A reciprocal recovery site is a data center that a separate company operates. Two or more organizations with similar processing needs will draw up a legal contract that obligates one or more of the organizations to temporarily house another party's systems in the event of a disaster. Often, a reciprocal agreement pledges not only floor space in a data center but also the use of the reciprocal partner's computer system. This type of arrangement is less common but is used by organizations that use mainframe computers and other high-cost systems. Security incidents cannot be prevented, at least not all of them. In this asymmetric cyber war, attackers have innovation, time, and the element of surprise on their side. It is imperative that every organization using IT develop formal security incident response plans, train their personnel, and continually practice with walkthroughs, drills, and simulations. Now we explore the incident response phases. Planning. This step involves developing written response plans, guidelines, and procedures to be followed when an incident occurs. These procedures are created after the organization's practices, processes, and technologies are well understood. This helps to ensure that incident response procedures align with security policy, business operations, the technologies in use, and practices regarding organizational architecture, development, management, and operations. The plans, guidelines, and procedures should identify and include key external partners. The planning cannot be conducted in a vacuum because many organizations rely on partners for key business functions. Detection represents the moment in which an organization is initially aware that a security incident is taking place or has taken place. Because a variety of events can characterize a security incident, an organization can become aware of an incident in several ways, including the following: application or network slowdown or malfunction, alerts from intrusion detection system, IDS, intrusion prevention system, IPS, data loss prevention, DLP, system, web content filter, cloud access security broker, CISB, extended detection and response, XDR, antivirus, firewalls, other detective and preventive security systems. Alerts from a security information and event management, SIEM, system. Media outlets and their investigators and reports. Notification from an employee or business partner. Anonymous tips. Notification from a regulator. Notification from a media outlet. Initiation. This is the phase in which response to the incident begins. Typically, it includes a declaration of an incident, followed by notifications sent to response team members so that response operations may begin. Depending upon the severity of the incident, notifications may be sent to business executives. Analysis. In this phase, response team members collect and analyze available data to understand the incident's cause, scope, and impact. This may involve using forensic analysis tools to understand the activities on individual systems. During this phase, partners or vendors may be engaged to collect information from their systems to determine the extent of the compromise. Containment. Incident responders perform more direct actions that halt or contain the progress or advancement of an incident. The steps required to contain an incident will vary according to the means used by the attacker. Techniques include blocking command and control traffic or taking storage systems offline. Senior leadership is usually involved in approving the containment actions of the team. In some cases, a mature incident response program will already have rules of engagement, so the technical teams know which actions are approved and which need input from senior leadership. Eradication. In this phase of incident response, responders take steps to remove the source of the incident. This could involve removing malware or physically removing an intruder. Recovery. When the incident has been evaluated and eradicated, it is often necessary to recover systems or components to their pre-incident state. This can include restoring data or configurations or replacing damaged or stolen equipment. Remediation. This activity involves any necessary changes that will reduce or eliminate the possibility of a similar incident occurring in the future. This may take the form of process or technology changes. Closure. Closure occurs when eradication, recovery, and remediation have been completed. Incident response operations are officially closed. Post-incident review. Shortly after the incident closes, incident responders and other personnel meet to discuss the incident, its cause, impact, and the organization's response. Discussion can range from lessons learned to possible improvements in technologies and processes to improve defense and response further. Now, we will talk about incident management tools. We will talk about incident response roles and responsibilities. A security incident response plan contains information about specific roles and responsibilities to ensure that a security incident is handled correctly and promptly. Typical defined roles and responsibilities include the following. Reporting security problems. Many organizations enact policies that require all personnel to report suspicious issues to security personnel. Incident detection. This may occur via dedicated security event monitoring personnel, in a security operations center, or SOC, or by people with other responsibilities. In the former case, personnel will periodically examine event logs or be sent messages when security events occur. Also, help desk or service desk personnel must be trained to recognize security incidents while working with end users and troubleshooting problems. Incident declaration. Some personnel are granted roles that can formally declare a security incident. They are usually trained to recognize various incidents and follow procedures to notify others. Incident declaration formally triggers the performance of incident response procedures and communications. Incident commander. Some personnel coordinate various activities as an incident unfolds and is managed. For this role, organizations typically select domain experts and other personnel with technical skills and backgrounds who can direct other personnel as an incident is examined, contained, and resolved. In severe and prolonged incidents, incident commanders will take shifts. Internal communications. These roles are designated to communicate information about an incident to personnel inside the organization to keep other internal parties informed on the proceedings of the incident and its response. External communications. This personnel are authorized to communicate with outside parties, including law enforcement, regulators, customers, partners, suppliers, shareholders, and the public. Typically, external communications are shared with one or more people who must approve any external communications and those who do the actual communicating. Legal counsel. Inside or outside counselors are generally responsible for interpreting applicable laws, regulations, and legal agreements. They advise other incident response personnel of steps that should, or should not, be taken. In many cases, incident investigations are protected by attorney-client privilege, which requires that legal counsel be involved in the main proceedings of the incident. Scribe. One or more scribes maintain records of all the proceedings. This includes but is not limited to actions taken by all incident response personnel, decisions, communications, and the location of records such as retained logs and artifacts from forensic analysis. Forensic analysis. Many security events require one or more people with expertise in computer and/or network forensics who seek to determine the cause of an incident and methods that can be used to contain and eradicate it. Because some security incidents may result in subsequent legal proceedings, forensic analysts employ evidence preservation techniques and establish a chain of custody to ensure evidence is not altered. Containment, eradication, remediation, and recovery. This personnel halt an incident's progress and recovers affected systems to their pre-incident states. While containment, eradication, remediation, and recovery are four distinct steps in incident response, they are often performed by the same personnel. Business continuity and emergency operations. A significant incident may result in considerable downtime or other business disruption, as one or more critical systems may be affected by an incident and taken out of service. An organization may need to invoke business continuity and/or emergency operations to continue critical business operations. Next, we will explore incident response tools and techniques. The detection of most security incidents, including malware and intrusions, requires the use of tools. Without these tools, organizations may be unaware of any incident in progress and may not learn of the incident until months or years later, if ever. Some tools are used to examine and analyze an incident that has been identified. They help security personnel understand events in one or more systems and/or networks. Other tools are sometimes used to eradicate and recover from an incident. Finally, tools can be used to chronicle all the events of an incident for later analysis during post-incident review and beyond. Incident response tools include the following. Logging. Events on individual systems and network devices often provide direct or indirect indications of intrusions and other incidents. Logs stored in a central server make this capability more powerful, as events from different systems and devices can appear together, providing a more comprehensive view of events. Log analysis and correlation. A SIEM provides log analysis and correlation to help security personnel realize when unwanted events are occurring or have occurred in the past. Alerting. A SIEM or other log processing system can be configured to produce alerts when specific incidents occur, proactively notifying security personnel that something requires attention. Threat hunting. Specialized tools are available to facilitate proactive threat hunting. Threat intelligence. Many organizations subscribe to one or more cyber threat intelligence feeds that help make personnel aware of actionable threats, enabling them to confirm that protective and detective measures are in place. Some threat intel feeds are meant to be fed directly into a SIEM, which will correlate threats with identified vulnerabilities to direct personnel to improve defenses. Other threats intel feeds are intended to be human-readable. This functionality is often packaged in a threat intelligence platform, TIP. Malware prevention. Antivirus and advanced anti-malware solutions on mobile devices, laptops, and servers detect the presence of malware and can often block or disrupt its activities. Firewalls, IPSs, web filters, and spam, phishing filters can also provide malware detection and prevention capabilities. Network intrusion prevention. IPSs analyze the details and contents of network traffic that passes through them, detecting and often blocking an initial intrusion or the command and control (CNC) traffic generated by malware that has successfully compromised the system. A typical IPS is configured to block specific traffic automatically and produce alerts when this occurs. but it will permit specific traffic. Network intrusion detection will alert personnel of suspected attacks without doing anything to stop them. Web content filter. Many organizations employ systems that protect from the hazards of users browsing malicious and fraudulent websites. Web content filters can block access to known malicious sites and sites associated with various types of inappropriate content. For example, an organization can block users from accessing sites that focus on pornography, weapons, hate crimes, or online gambling. Some web content filters can examine the contents of traffic and can block malware from reaching end-user devices. File integrity monitoring, FIM. FIM systems periodically scan file systems on servers and workstations and report any changes. Although changes may result from periodic maintenance, they can also be indicators of compromise. A typical FIM system alerts a SIEM to notify SOC analysts of a potential intrusion. File activity monitoring, FAM. FAM systems monitor directories and files on servers or workstations to detect unusual activities that may indicate compromise. A typical FAM system sends alerts to a SIEM, where SOC analysts will watch for alerts. Forensic analysis. These tools are used to study the events on a system, examine the contents of file systems and memory, and analyze malware to understand its structure and actions. Their use requires forensic skills and experience. They usually don't reveal what happened but instead show detailed information to a forensic examiner, who determines which elements to examine to uncover the relevant chain of events. Forensic analysis is used to examine a malware attack and chronicle the events of an employee accused of misbehavior. Video surveillance. This is needed for incidents involving human activity, usually the comings and goings of personnel, intruders, and any items they carry. Record keeping. Decision steps are undertaken, and communications need to be recorded so that incident responders can understand the activities that have taken place during incident response and provide a backward look during post-incident review. Cyber insurance companies and incident response. Although organizations have been able to purchase cyber insurance policies for decades, it is only in the last few years that cyber insurance companies have become intimately involved in organizations' security practices and incident response. This involvement has deepened following a plague of ransomware attacks and large insurance payouts in recent years. As a result, cyber insurance companies are doing the following: becoming keenly aware of the specific risk factors leading to costly incidents. Thoroughly vet organizations' security programs and capabilities, using lengthy questionnaires and requests for specific artifacts such as security policies and detailed configuration information. Creating policies with more detailed terms, conditions, and exclusions. Charging organizations higher premiums with limitations and benefits if an organization is deemed to have substandard security practices and safeguards in place, or denying them coverage at any price. Becoming deeply involved in security incident response, sometimes by directing one of a short list of security professional services firms to perform computer and network forensics. Obtaining cyber insurance is becoming increasingly difficult as insurance companies are becoming more stringent on requirements such as multi-factor authentication and anti-malware. An organization must be aware of the fine print of its cybersecurity policy, otherwise, the organization may find the policy worthless when it's time to file a claim. Now, we will explore more managed security service providers, MSSP. This is a prevalent concept nowadays. A large number of organizations have centralized logging, a SIEM, vulnerability scanning, and other capabilities, but these are not large enough to warrant staffing a Security Operations Center, SOC, 24/7/365. To ensure full coverage, including coverage for sick days, vacations, holidays, and training, a minimum of 12 personnel may be required to staff a SOC, not counting the SOC manager, software licenses and the equipment and space required. For this reason, many organizations outsource the monitoring of their SIEMs and related activities to a managed security services provider, MSSP, aka MSS. Modern MSSP's capabilities include the following: Managed SIEM, Managed Vulnerability Scanning, Managed Data Loss Prevention, Managed Endpoint Security Monitoring, Managed Detection and Response, MDR, Security Incident Response and Forensics. MSSPs monitor events and incidents in dozens or hundreds of customer organizations and have a large staff to ensure full coverage at peak workloads. Because qualified security personnel can be difficult to attract and retain, many organizations are turning to MSSPs to offload routine tasks and free themselves of the burden of staffing and running a SOC. Organizations that outsource parts of their security operations to an MSSP need to be mindful of several considerations, including the following. Operational partnership. An MSSP typically performs a monitoring function but, in most cases, does not take remedial action. Therefore, when the MSSP identifies an actionable incident, it hands off the incident to someone in the customer organization to take the necessary action. Service level agreements. An MSSP typically publishes a schedule of SLAs so that customers understand how responsive the MSSP will be in various scenarios. Organizations should regularly test their MSSP to verify that events are being monitored and comply with the SLAs for alerting in response to events. Another key concept will be incident detection. The detection phase marks the start of an organization's awareness of a security incident. In many cases, some time elapses between the beginning of an actual incident and the moment that the organization is aware of it. This period is known as dwell time. The ability to detect an intrusion or incident requires event visibility, typically achieved through event log collection and analysis tools, usually a SIEM system, and other tools that monitor and detect activities in networks, servers, and endpoints. An organization can be made aware of an incident in several ways, including but not limited to the following. Reporting by an employee. An organization's personnel can be aware of certain incidents, especially misbehavior by other employees. Reporting by an MSSP or SOC analyst. Personnel monitoring the organization's networks and systems will likely detect suspicious activities and initiate an investigation and response. Reporting by a customer or client. An organization's customers or clients may have noticed phenomena related to a breach and may report it to the organization. Social media. Clients, customers, and other parties may report observations about a security incident via social media, particularly if they have no other means of notifying the organization. Notification from law enforcement or regulator. In the case of information theft, outside organizations and agencies may become aware through higher fraud rates. Law enforcement investigations reveal the source of the intrusion. Notification from a security researcher. Security researchers sometimes discover vulnerabilities or signs of intrusion in other organizations' networks. Unknown persons. Occasionally, someone not associated with the organization will notify the organization of a security problem. For example, a passerby may notice discarded assets tossed aside by someone who stole them. IT personnel or end users. A security incident may initially appear as a malfunctioning or error in a system or application. Only through analysis is the malfunction determined to be caused by an intruder. For this reason, IT service desk personnel need to be trained to detect security issues when users call for help. After detection, we will follow by analyzing it. In the security incident response analysis phase, response team members evaluate and rank available information to reveal the nature and criticality of the incident. This phase may include the use of forensic examination techniques that permit the examiner to determine how an incident was able to occur. Incident ranking and rating. The types and severities of security incidents vary significantly. A relatively minor incident, such as the loss of a laptop computer with encrypted contents, would be considered far less serious than the theft and exploitation of a large database containing sensitive customer information, for example. Accordingly, An organization's incident response plans should include steps to determine the scope and severity of an incident. This will help the organization determine the amount and types of resources that may be required and determine whether executive management is informed of an incident. Forensic investigations. After a security incident, the organization may determine that an investigation is needed to determine the cause and effects. A forensic investigator gathers, studies, and retains information that may be needed in a court of law should the incident result in legal proceedings. Because the information collected in an investigation may later be used in legal proceeding, a forensic investigator must understand the requirements regarding the chain of custody and other evidence protection activities that ensure that evidence can be used in court. Chain of custody. The key to an effective and successful forensic investigation is establishing a good chain of custody. A chain of custody documents, in precise detail, how and when evidence is protected against tampering through every step of the investigation. Any irregularities in the information acquisition and analysis process will likely be looked at unfavorably in legal proceedings, possibly resulting in the organization failing to convince judicial authorities that the event occurred as described. After analyzing all these, you will be able to determine the gaps and how badly the organization is in shape. From this step, you will be able to know how to approach and improve the whole posture. A breach of privacy is a unique type of security incident. In a privacy breach, an attacker may steal or compromise sensitive or private data about employees, customers, or other persons. The steps taken during incident response will be the same as those for breaches of other types of information. Privacy is guided by law, and there are unique incidents that are out of the norm, and we need to know how to handle them. One thing to note is that, although in terms of cybersecurity, you are already secure, you might not have met the privacy controls accordingly to the law, especially when it comes to GDPR. Lastly, we must ensure that data is kept as per requirements. Incident handlers must handle privacy data according to the organization's security and privacy policies. The organization may be required to notify affected people immediately after the incident. Organizations that store or process information within the scope of privacy laws should include a security incident categorization that covers privacy incidents. Security incident plans or playbooks should include specific information that directs incident responders to perform all necessary steps, including notifications and disclosures. Outsourcing is key in organizations, so we need to understand incidents involving service providers. With many organizations outsourcing one or more principal business applications to external service providers, organizations need to develop plans that include the procedure to follow when an incident or breach occurs in a service provider's environment. An organization that provides software as a service, SIS, will likely detect an incident, such as a malware attack or an intrusion when it occurs. The legal agreement between the organization and the SIS provider should stipulate the circumstances in which the SIS provider will notify affected customers. For the most part, the SIS provider will perform most or all phases of security incident response, but that does not mean that the customer organization has nothing to do. A breach in a SIS organization is still a breach, and the customer organization must have an incident response plan that considers such circumstances. When there is a breach, the organization will not have access to all the data for investigation, and this can be a serious consideration for the company. And when members' or customers' data is key to your business, organizations will have to rely mainly on the SIS provider's incident response to proceed and close the incident. However, the customer organization will need to be informed along the way, as it will need to pursue damage control, including notification of affected parties. Organizations are fully accountable when a breach occurs in a service provider's organization. The organization selected the service provider and is accountable for all outcomes, including breaches. Incident containment includes the steps taken to prevent the incident from spreading further. First, we must stop the incident from spreading. Containment requires knowledge of the particulars of the incident and is most successful after the incident is examined and its techniques are identified in the assessment phase. Containment is distinct from eradication, which is the removal of threats or threat actors from the environment. The threat still exists when containment has been completed, but it cannot proceed further because containment measures have been taken. Then, we need to isolate the affected system from the network. Many cyber attacks can be contained by curtailing their network communications. If the attacker's communication connections have been severed to prevent establishing or resuming communications, often the attack can be considered to be contained. Based upon the nature of the intrusion, containment may involve network changes in a firewall, IPS, or edge router to black hole communications from the attacker's network. Indeed, one of the main functions of an IPS is to block communications with known domains, and IP address ranges known to be malicious. But for an attack originating from a malicious network not yet identified by an IPS, the organization can quickly implement a rule to block the IP address, range, or entire country's range of IP networks, as appropriate. Lastly, we need both processes together with tools to work together. Many forms of malware, including ransomware, utilize C&C communications from the computer they have attacked to servers controlled by the malware operator. While managed IPS systems block C&C traffic from known adversaries, recognize new, unclassified commands, and proactively block traffic. However, security incident responders also realize that some forms of malware are not completely incapacitated when their C&C traffic is disrupted. They still may be able to operate independently and may even continue to explore an organization's network and even infect additional systems. This is another reason why isolating affected systems is so important. Similarly, if the malware's C&C is DNS-based, incident responders may be able to block C&C traffic effectively by preventing DNS lookups to the domains identified as malicious. When an attack has been identified, and once the organization has collected available information about the attack can be effectively contained by severing most or all network communications from the target system. This may, however, also impair incident responders from carrying out subsequent eradication and restoration steps if they cannot communicate with the system. Other techniques are available in the containment phase. For instance, if the attacker can compromise systems through privilege escalation, locking the affected user or system account may prevent the attacker from successfully compromising additional systems. Also, if ransomware actively encrypts files on a network share, blocks authentication on the network share, or removes the network share altogether, removing affected systems from the network effectively contains the attack. Security incident response, in its details, needs to be more straightforward. While timely communication with specific parties is essential, organizations must not over-communicate the details of an incident. Sometimes, the organization should limit communications about the existence of an incident only to authorized parties rather than the entire organization. The incident response team should also consider using out-of-band communications if normal communications channels are suspected to be compromised. For instance, if the team believes that corporate email and/or instant messaging is compromised, an entirely different system should be used for communication until the incident has been closed. Crisis management and communications. Many organizations employ crisis management and/or crisis communications personnel and procedures. Both exist to improve responses to various business emergencies, including business interruptions. These capabilities should be incorporated into security incident response plans if they exist. An organization uses the crisis management process to respond to various business emergencies. One could liken crisis management to a general mobilization plan for business leaders and others to respond quickly and effectively to disruptive events. Given that disasters and security incidents fall into disruptive events, a security incident response plan, business continuity plan, and disaster recovery plan should utilize the capabilities in crisis management. Why would an organization develop a similar, parallel capability instead of using what it already has. Crisis management does not exist to take over or control business continuity, disaster recovery, or security incident response. Instead, crisis management can provide templates and techniques for communications and escalation. Crisis management should help simplify the overall effort of responding to all business emergencies. Crisis communication is a subset of the overall public relations function used to inform internal and external parties of the proceedings of business emergencies. A crisis communications person or team often prepares for a variety of business emergencies through pre-written press releases and prepared remarks that can be tailored for each event. Crisis communications often establish relationships with internal and external parties such as investor relations, public safety, and news media. Policy related to crisis management and communications should define the personnel authorized to communicate with external parties. But even then, an organization's top executives may often be required to approve individual external communications. Attorney-client privilege. Some organizations utilize their legal counsel as a central point of communication during a security incident. When done properly, this may permit an organization to shield communications and other proceedings from discovery in case of a lawsuit. This practice is known as attorney-client privilege. Consult with legal counsel to understand the applicability and procedures for this approach. We will also need to involve PR and legal to ensure correct messaging. Communications in the incident response plan. Communications procedures, including identifying the specific parties involved in incident communications, should be sufficiently detailed so that incident responders will know precisely whom to inform, what to say, and not say, and how often to communicate. Personnel doing the communicating and receiving communication need to understand the serious and sensitive nature of incident communications and limit communications to the fewest possible personnel. Limiting communications to few authorized persons. A few security incidents should be discussed organization-wide. Instead, communications about an incident should involve the fewest possible numbers of personnel. Each of those persons needs to understand explicitly any obligations regarding the need to keep the lid on news and details about a security incident. Moving on will be law enforcement proceedings. Organizations sometimes involve local, regional, or national law enforcement when an incident occurs. Law enforcement organizations can be outstanding business partners in these situations, sometimes making cyber incident experts available to help the organization understand what happened. It is a good practice to determine the key points of contact for various agencies with which your organization is most likely to interact during an incident. This helps ensure that lines of communication are already established, which can shorten the time for an agency to engage with the organization. Often, a law enforcement organization will request that the organization refrain from publicly disclosing details about the incident, sometimes requiring that the organization say nothing to the public. This is understandable, particularly if the law enforcement agency attempts to identify the perpetrators in the incident to apprehend and charge them with a crime. In these cases, organizations must keep detailed records so that all incident response team members know what information is known about the incident, what has been communicated with law enforcement, and what has been communicated publicly. We need to take note of record keeping. Typical incident response plans often direct that all proceedings of incident response be recorded so that post-incident activities can be informed by the steps taken during the incident. This record-keeping should include emails, notifications, decisions, artifacts, reports, and virtually everything connected with the incident. A standard, consistent methodology for recording incidents facilitates future research by making specific types of information easier to find. For instance, if MITRE, ATT and CK is used to analyze malware, a folder called MITRE containing this information could be created for each incident. Organizations must identify a secure, reliable data storage system for storing information about each incident. Access should be granted to the fewest numbers of personnel possible, as some of this information is highly sensitive and could help future attackers by revealing the organization's architecture and defenses. The chosen repository should support the chain of custody or a separate storage technique used when a chain of custody is needed. Organizations that utilize ticketing systems often prefer to record the proceedings of a security incident in the ticketing system. Although this may be a favored solution, many ticketing systems' contents are viewable by numerous personnel. If a ticketing system is used, it should have a way of marking tickets containing incident information as private or restricted so that only the fewest number of authorized personnel can view notes and artifacts. When access to those tickets cannot be restricted or controlled, a different repository should be selected. In addition to developing repositories to contain details about each incident, organizations also need to produce and maintain an incident log, which serves as a master index that contains all security incidents that have occurred in the past. The log may be a simple worksheet or database containing information such as the following: incident number, incident date, incident name, short description, incident context and severity, URL or another pointer to the repository containing incident details. Access to the incident log should be restricted to few personnel on a need-to-know basis. We will take a look at the incident response matrix. We need to understand how to track if the incident response program is working correctly. An organization's security incident response program can be managed and improved only to the extent that key metrics are established to measure the program's performance. Metrics that can be developed and reported include the following: the incidence of each incident severity and type, dwell time, time from the start of the incident to the time the organization became aware of the incident, time required to contain the incident, time required to resolve and close each incident, the number of times incident response SLAs still needed to be met. Improvements were identified and implemented based on tabletop exercises and lessons learned from actual incidents. Number or percentage of employees receiving security awareness training, as well as any correlation between this and the number of incidents. The number of records compromised. The number of external people affected and notified. And finally, we need to know the total cost and effort required to resolve each incident. Then we can rationalize we should proceed not. Finally, we'll be reporting. Like any management report, the information security manager must identify target audiences and tailor reporting for those audiences based on the types of information of interest to them. Reports may include metrics, key risk indicators, KRIs, and key performance indicators, KPIs, that help management better understand whether the incident response program is effective at detecting and responding to incidents. For instance, security incident reporting for a board of directors may contain a list of significant incidents and metrics showing the incident's trends over time. This reporting should inform the audience of basic facts, including whether the number of incidents is increasing or decreasing over time, whether the effort and cost of incident response increase or decrease over time, whether any significant incidents have occurred, including any requiring regulator or public disclosure, what measures are planned to improve detection and response. Security leaders need to be able to explain trends to senior executives. For instance, an increase in the number of security incidents does not necessarily mean that defenses are deteriorating. Instead, the number of attacks may increase, or the ability to detect attacks is improving. Incident eradication is another key you will need to know. Eradication is the complete removal of the agents that caused harm in an incident. To remove threat agents successfully, the security incident response team must be confident in earlier containment steps. Depending on the nature of the incident, this may involve the removal of physical subjects from a work center or information processing center or the removal of malware from one or more affected systems. Modern malware and intrusion techniques can be difficult to identify and even more difficult to remove. Incident eradication depends on how successful the containment can work out. Malware can have characteristics or employ techniques that make it more resilient, including the following: hiding within legitimate processes, fileless malware, and forensics techniques include encryption, steganography, file wiping, and trail obfuscation. Hiding data in memory, slack space, bad blocks, hidden partitions, or the registry. Hiding below the operating system in the master boot record, in a virtual machine hypervisor, or the system's basic input-output system, BIOS, or a Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, UEFI. The personnel who examine infected systems must have up-to-date skills and experience to identify and remove malware and other attack artifacts. All these must be documented. The recovery phase of security incident response focuses on restoring affected systems and assets to their pre-incident state. Recovery is performed after eradication is completed. This means that any malware or other tools used by the intruder have been removed. The state of a system entering the recovery phase is described as free of all tools, files, and agents used by the intruder. There are two basic approaches to recovery. Restoration of damaged files. In this approach, incident responders have a high degree of certainty that all artifacts used by the intruder have been removed from the system. While this is a valid approach, it does come with some risk, as it may be challenging to determine positively that all components used by the intruder are removed. We also need to think about it when we encounter damaged files. What should we do? And are these files acceptable for the organization to be removed? Or is there any contract liability towards the organization when the data and the files are damaged? Bare metal restores. This approach removes all information from the system and recovers from backup. Typically, this involves reformatting the main storage. Incident responders must be aware of advanced techniques attackers use, including persistence in the computer's BIOS, UEFI, or hidden main storage partitions. Further, if the systems being restored are virtual machines, personnel must determine that new virtual machine images are free of infection. In some situations, a single operation, such as bare metal restoration, may function as both eradication and recovery. However, incident responders should prefer something other than such a measure to save time. Instead, eradication and recovery measures should be chosen based on their effectiveness. Malware cannot be permitted to persist in any circumstance. Post-incident review practices will be the last we want to talk about. After the affected systems and devices have been eradicated from their attack artifacts and recovered to normal use, incident response moves into a post-incident phase. Incident responders and other key security and IT personnel will close the active portion of incident response and begin discussions that hopefully lead to the generation of ideas to improve defenses and response. After an incident has been identified, its causes eradicated, and any affected systems remediated and recovered, the incident can be closed. Mainly this is a back-to-business-as-usual declaration. Some activities are necessary for full closure. Archival of forensic evidence. All information and records obtained through forensic analysis must be archived. The chain of custody must continue, however, should any legal proceedings occur in the future. Archival of communications records. Copies of internal communications and notifications sent to outside parties must be preserved. Notification to internal personnel and outside authorities. All personnel and outside authorities who have been notified of the incident need to be informed that the incident has been closed. Report issuance. Formal reports are produced for internal and external audiences that describe the incident and all of the steps of detection, response, eradication, remediation, and recovery. The preceding information should be packaged and stored in a protected system with strict access controls. These technical details require protection because they could be used to exploit the organization. Finally, we need to do a post-incident review. When all incident response proceedings have concluded, the organization should consider reviewing the incident that has taken place. A post-incident review should include a frank, open discussion that identifies what went well during the incident response and what could have been handled or performed better. A typical post-incident review should cover the following: incident awareness, Determine whether the organization realized quickly enough that an incident was occurring. Internal communications. Determine whether internal communications were well organized, the right personnel were involved, and the right information was shared with the appropriate parties. External communications. Determine whether external communications were well organized, including communications with regulators, law enforcement, customers, insurance companies, and the public. Response procedures. Determine whether incident response personnel acted quickly, decisively, and correctly. Knowledge and training. Determine whether incident responders had sufficient experience to perform their tasks effectively. Resilience. The organization examines its environment, including technology and business processes, to discover opportunities to improve its resilience. This can help the organization better defend itself by reducing incident probability and impact. Security organizations should always operate with the culture of continuous improvement. In this regard, reviewing every aspect of a recent security incident should seek to identify improvements that will enable the organization to be better prepared when another incident occurs. Some organizations bring in an expert third party to facilitate post-incident review to minimize emotional response from incident response team members. A third-party facilitator can help the organization avoid any tendency to identify scapegoats and to focus instead on the response itself and potential improvements to detective, preventive, and responsive controls and procedures. We have now finished our session and coverage of all 4 domains. Are you confident and ready to go for the exam and get certified to be a CISM? Please do like and share these lessons with all around you. Not just for cybersecurity professionals but for anyone keen to grow their knowledge in cybersecurity and understand how to protect themselves. Remember, Domain 4 comprises 30% of the overall CISM information security management areas. Stay focused and clam and you will be there soon. Go back and watch the previous lessons if you need a quick revision, and leave a comment if it helped. Domain 1 focuses on information security governance. Domain 2 will be on information security risk management. Domain 3 will covers information security program, and the last domain will talk about incident management. If you like this video, then please do like and subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell to follow on the latest video.